introduced to the sacred timeline. Now, at first, appeared like this was a single timeline, the timeline of the MCU. But then, as the series went on, we learned about other Loki variants and timelines that were allowed to exist as long as they didn't violate the proper flow of time. Plus, in the Loki Season 1 finale, it's seemingly confirmed that the sacred timeline is actually a collection of parallel realities that run alongside one another without touching. And they create an Ouroboros.
It's like a snake eating its own tail.
An Ouroboros being a circular series of events that happen again and again and again. The TVA's mission was to keep these timelines in check, make sure they stayed on their path and don't collide into one another. He Who Remains, aka Kang, said that this was the only way to assure that the multiverse survived.
Without the me, without the TVA, everything burns.
TVA.
Loki didn't like this method because it didn't allow for free will or choice, and he discovered an alternative to He Who Remains' methods, the creation of the multiversal tree. This allowed for the sacred timeline and all other timelines to branch and grow freely like a healthy tree would. Think of the sacred timeline as the trunk, and think of the many splintering realities as limbs and branches. In Deadpool and Wolverine, we hear Mr. Paradox refer to a time when the TVA used to prune branches simply and elegantly, and even did a snipping motion with his fingers.
Snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap.
Now this, of course, is referring to the time before Loki took over. Now, with various realities, of course, come various versions of the same people. Sometimes they look a lot alike, and sometimes they look very different. Take the 3 Spider-Men, for example. These 3 Peters Parker all look different, but they're very much alike.
Peter!
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Did you mean?
Peter.
We're all called Peter.
Peter Parker?
Same again. We're all Peter Parker.
Or take Doctor Strange's variants. Thus far, they've all looked like our 616 Stephen Strange. A lot of the Kangs look alike too. We've seen Lokis that look just like Tom Hiddleston, but we've also seen others of different races, sexes, and even species.
You're telling me that thing's a Loki too?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So now I'm telling you all this to remind you and drive home the fact that there aren't really any strict rules to the MCU's multiverse. And it's pretty clear that there's no set of rules established at Marvel Studios when it comes to handling the multiverse.
The multiverse is a concept about which we know frighteningly little.
It's messy, it's convoluted, and for the most part, it just don't make no sense. Hell, in What If Season 1, we learned that there can be multiple timelines in one universe.
Perfectly not confusing.
And with all due respect to Kevin Feige, I think the man himself would have trouble explaining exactly how their version of the multiverse works.
Sometimes shit happens, someone has to deal with it, and who are you gonna call?
So now let's talk about anchor beams, absolute points in time, and what all of that means for the Fox universe and whether or not there are now 2 Wolverines in Deadpool's timeline. I mean, at the end of the day, I know the movie opens up all these questions like, are there 2 Wolverines and how do timelines work? But that's really not the point of the movie. Even like the way Gambit says that he may have been born in the void, he doesn't remember. This is all just encouraging the audience to let go of logic and have fun for a little while, which is why all these cameos work so well. I know, I mean, I grew up with those 2000s Marvel movies. X-Men was my first movie ever, and I saw it with my dad, and, well, you know, he's not around anymore. So this movie was real special to me. Exactly. You know, we're all in this weird age of nostalgia where we all seem to be longing for the past while also craving something new. Because, I mean, we're all getting older and we all long for the simpler times of our childhood before we had bills and responsibilities, or for me, before I started losing my hair. Wait, you're losing your hair? Me too. Well, I mean, if your hair is thinning, don't worry, because you can actually do something about it with Keeps. They're the sponsor of this video. You will not believe how many guys like us start losing their hair, but then they put off doing something about it. I have been using Keeps for years, and if it weren't for Keeps, I would have lost my hair years ago. Wow, so you really use Keeps? Sure do, and what I like most about Keeps is that it's convenient, delivered straight to my front door, and I don't have to go through the hassle of making appointments and waiting in line at some office. I get a personalized plan from a licensed medical provider without leaving my home. I can even message this medical provider at any time via their secure messaging portal. Keeps offers both of the FDA-approved hair loss treatment options, as well as a 2-in-1 treatment that combines both treatments. And now they offer a new product, the Daily Hair Defense Supplement, which includes a doctor-formulated mega mix of essential daily vitamins and minerals, plus a clinically proven dose of saw palmetto extract that helps stabilize hair loss and promotes healthy hair growth. In fact, most Keeps customers see results within 6 months of starting treatment. So it is important to act fast, and you have to start early and stick with it. Keeps stopped my hair loss right in its tracks, and they have helped over 1 million men like us with only science-backed ingredients. That's why Keeps has more than 5,000 5-star reviews. So guys, if you are noticing you're losing your hair, don't ignore it or hope it goes away. Do something about it today, because hair loss stops with Keeps. Keeps has made a huge difference in my life. thank you guys so much for sponsoring this video and for the free product. So to get up to 50% off a 3-month plan, go to keeps.com/screencrush or click the link in the description below. That's keeps.com/screencrush. Now, back to Deadpool and Wolverine. So in Deadpool and Wolverine, it's implied that the events of Logan take place on the same timeline as the Deadpool films, as well as other Fox X-Men films that preceded Deadpool. Logan's death in the year 2029 has resulted in Deadpool's universe beginning to die. It's explained that Logan was the anchor being of Deadpool's world, meaning that when he died, that universe became anchorless and began to decay. And this happens in a backward fashion, just like when a tree gets sick and dies. When trees get sick and begin to die, it always starts at the very tips of the branches and then works its way down the limbs to the trunk and eventually kills the entire tree. To keep a sick tree from dying, you would have to trim that limb entirely and hope that the infection would not spread. So I suppose that the same is true for a multiversal tree. When the universe begins to naturally die, it must be clipped from the tree so that the rest of the multiverse won't be affected.
Hey, look at that. It's gonna make it, huh?
Because have strong root.
From the way Paradox talks about it, it would appear that he wants to kill the entire branch the moment it begins to die, whereas this new and reformed TVA likely allows the universe to continue its life until its final moments and then finally separates it from the tree to protect other realities.
But how would a dying universe affect the other universes?
Well, this is the reason why we see variants pruned from other realities like Elektra, Blade, and Gambit. As their universes were beginning to die, the TVA preemptively pruned them because they knew that they would try to keep their universe alive, probably by traveling to other universes, which would have caused incursions and spread further rot on the multiversal tree.
An incursion occurs when the boundary between two universes erodes and they collide, destroying one or both entirely.
Okay, so that all makes sense. Logan dies in the future, and that sends a rippling effect down the timeline, and the universe is dying. But here's where it gets weird. Deadpool and Wolverine takes place in the present day. Logan takes place in 2029. So this would mean that, when Deadpool is taken from his universe and brought to the TVA in this movie, that there would still be a living Wolverine in Deadpool's present. He hasn't died yet, and the events of Logan have yet to happen. So it is a little odd that we never see Deadpool attempt to go find Wolverine in the present day and stop him from going down the path that he goes in Logan.
But one day, your old pal Wade's gonna ask you to get back in the saddle again. When he does, say yes.
We just see Deadpool use the TVA temp pad to travel to the even more distant future and dig up Logan's body. And I say distant future because of how decayed Logan's body is in that scene. He's just adamantium bones. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely love seeing Deadpool desecrating Logan's grave. Best opening sequence ever. But if we want to overthink it, and hey, that's what we're here for, then we have to ask why Deadpool went to a moment in time after Logan died. I get that he hoped Logan could regenerate and come back to life, but why not just use a temp pad to travel to the moment before Logan died and just save him? But instead, he decides to travel the multiverse and find a replacement Wolverine. You have a temp pad, just travel back in time.
Or because that would undo the sacrifice that Logan made and his fans would riot.
Okay, fair enough, but I'm asking what's the in-universe narrative reason? No narrative reason is ever given as to why he didn't just travel back a few years and get that exact same Logan, the anchor being of his reality, or why he doesn't just travel back to his present day and find the same Logan.
Hey, it's me. Don't scratch.
Go fuck yourself, pretty boy.
Yep, that was a good one.
Well, we can think of a super easy way to address this plot hole. Logan's death is an absolute point in time.
Absolute.
Unchangeable. Unmovable.
And what if we were introduced to the concept of moments in time that can never be undone? And if they were undone, the very fabric of that universe would begin to crumble and the universe would die.
Meddling with time and events only leads to more destruction.
So, if they had established that Logan's death was an absolute point in time, then that would explain why Deadpool cannot undo it. He would be right back in a situation where his universe is dying.
Break enough canon, save enough captains.
And it's likely the case that Logan's ultimate sacrifice is the very thing that made him the anchor being in the first place. Plus, as we learned in Avengers Endgame,
if you travel to the past, that past becomes your future, and your former present becomes the past, which can't now be changed by your new future.
So I guess, hypothetically speaking, had Deadpool traveled to a moment in time before Wolverine died and then saved him from death, that would have just created a splinter timeline anyways, which I guess would not even solve his problem. But I think we can explain the two Wolverine situation and make it all make sense.
That man's an imposter.
That man is the imposter.
At the end of the movie, Wolverine stays with Deadpool in his universe in 2024. And if the Logan from Deadpool's world doesn't die until 2029, then that would mean that there are now two Wolverines coexisting in this timeline. Or would it? We have to keep in mind that the timeline Deadpool exists within has always been a little different from the mainline Fox timeline. Sure, we see the X-Mansion, but we never really see any X-Men besides Colossus and Negasonic Teenage Warhead.
It's a big house. It's funny that I only ever see two of you. It's almost like the studio couldn't afford another X-Man.
And the Colossus in Deadpool's world is nothing like the Colossus from Hugh Jackman's X-Men films. It's also worth mentioning that we never actually see a Wolverine in Deadpool's timeline. And the X-Men we do see briefly in this little gag in Deadpool 2 are the young X-Men, which makes no sense because Deadpool 2 takes place in 2018.
These timelines are so confusing.
And even if we take Deadpool out of the equation, we've seen the Fox X-Men timeline retcon rewritten a few times, suggesting that it already has multiple timelines within itself.
I think the history I know is a little different.
But Deadpool says to Wolverine that in his world, Wolverine was very highly regarded.
In my world, you're well regarded. Wolverine was a hero in my world.
Yes, that's true, but again, Deadpool's universe is kind of weird. It's almost as if in his reality the X-Men are an idea, but we never actually see them. I think when Deadpool says, "in my world," he's simply referring to the Fox reality as a whole, a reality that he, as a fourth wall-breaking character, has knowledge of.
I am Marvel Jesus.
So, all of this leads us to believe that while Deadpool certainly exists on the same limb as those Fox X-Men movies, he exists on a very different branch.
Yeah, you lost me on the whole limb versus branch thing.
Okay, so we have a multiversal tree. It has a trunk.
Then you pee on, got it?
So the trunk has several limbs that stem from it, and those limbs have several branches that stem from them. Our theory is that the Fox X-Men universe is a limb of the multiversal tree, but the Deadpool timeline is one of many smaller branches from that limb. And I'm not just pulling that out of my void, guys. This theory is fully supported by the graphics used to depict Deadpool's universe on the TVA screens at the beginning of the movie, as well as when we see Deadpool's universe regenerating on B-15's tent pad at the end. In both scenarios, we see a solid line that represents the universe, but stemming from that line, we see little branches connected to the tree. And those branches are also dying once the part of the limb they're attached to dies. And we see those branches grow back at the end of the film as the timeline regenerates. This means that Logan exists on the main limb of the Fox X-Men universe, the primary limb, the limb that the main X-Men movies take place on.
I promise you this will make sense.
And this is supported by things that we have seen in the Loki series as well. We hear the mainline MCU referred to as 616. But then in Loki, we see branches that have stemmed from Universe 616, and they are labeled 616, followed by a decimal point and another series of numbers. Those are the branched realities. I think this means that the limb is essentially the anchor of an entire reality, and limbs have anchor beings that help keep that limb alive. But when that being dies, the limb begins to die. And as it decays backwards, its branches die with it, just like we saw in the TVA graphics. So no, Logan does not take place in the future of Deadpool's timeline. Deadpool's timeline is its own thing that is branched off of the main limb of the Fox universe.
Come again?
But when Logan died, the limb began to decay, which means that every timeline attached to that universe will die, including Deadpool. And this could explain why we saw an adult Laura in the Void. With the timeline dying backwards, starting when Logan died, her point of existence would have been the first to fade. She was allowed to grow up because it takes time for the universe to die, and her existence in the distant future meant that she was one of the first victims of the retroactively dying timeline. So no, I don't believe that there are two Wolverines in Deadpool's timeline. I don't think there are two X-23s either, and I don't think the Logan sacrifice is going to be written over in Deadpool's timeline now that it has a bright new future. Logan still happens, but the universe is no longer doomed because of it. Deadpool and Wolverine were able to cure their entire limb. B-15 says not only did you save your world, you saved your timeline from extinction. And it was like this sacrifice the two heroes were willing to make that cemented them both as the Fox universe's new anchor beings. And that could be why we see them recruited by Loki in Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars to save the multiverse from Doctor Doom.
New mask. Same task.
We think that Loki may recruit other anchor beings from every universe and form a team of multiversal Avengers, just like in the comics, and Deadpool and Wolverine are their universe's new anchor beings.
Hey, I just want to say thanks for the keeps. I got to keep my hair.
And just a reminder to stop your hair loss today, click our link in the description for a special offer from Keeps. So guys, those are just our thoughts on the very complicated and confusing state of the MCU's universe. Huge shout out to Colton Ogburn for writing this video and Pavel T for his edits. You can find their links below. But what did you think? Do you have any more questions about the multiverse? Let us know in the comments or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, guys, welcome to the channel. Please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy. Hey, welcome back to Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is the definitive history of Wolverine. We are going to break down the full history of this character from the comics by legends such as Chris Claremont, Paul Jenkins, and Barry Windsor-Smith to the now revived iconic animated series. And we actually interviewed Chris Claremont, Fabian Nicieza, and Paul Jenkins about these iconic storylines that these men created. That's right, the people who actually shaped the history of Wolverine are going to be talking to us in this video. Wolverine first appeared in the Incredible Hulk number 180 in 1974 and a very brief cameo at the end of the issue. However, in the following issue, 181, Wolverine truly debuted in all his glory. Created by writer Len Wein and artist John Romita Sr. with the help of Herb Trimpe, Wolverine was first drawn to be fierce, mysterious, and fearless. You have to be if you're going to be taking on the big guy.
First exposure to Wolverine in the comic was Wolverine's first appearance in the comic, which was Hulk 181.
He slashed Hulk, Hulk punched him. He slashed Hulk, Hulk punched him more. You know, it was a standard Hulk story.
And quite frankly, the character didn't make much of an impression on me one way or the other at that time.
Everything about the Wolverine was in limbo.
In the comic, Wolverine appears in his iconic blue and yellow battling against the Hulk. The Hulk had been mysteriously drawn to a cave by Marie Cartier and George Baptiste, trying to save her brother Paul from a terrible curse that turns him into the immoral being called the Wendigo. They plan to transfer the power of the Wendigo to the Hulk, thus restoring Paul Cartier to his normal life. During the Hulk's confrontation with Wendigo, Wolverine shows up on behalf of the Canadian government under the code Weapon X to capture and detain the Hulk. Marie then attempts and fails to perform the occult ritual on the Hulk, who immediately returns to fight Wolverine before Canadian officials intervene. Since his debut, Wolverine and the Hulk have remained intertwined in various comic series and cartoon events, sometimes as adversaries and sometimes as a friend from work.
We know each other! Friend from work!
Now, while we have yet to see them go toe-to-toe on the big screen in live action, we have an inkling that Jackman's return as Logan isn't just for Ryan Reynolds. In these early appearances, Wolverine was depicted as a short and stocky Canadian mutant with a regenerative healing factor, retractable claws made of adamantium, that is a virtually indestructible metal, and an animalistic furfur rage. His past was shrouded in mystery with only fragments of his memory intact. Now this was intentional.
I think the less you know about a character, the more interesting they are.
Wolverine's rise to prominence began in 1975 when he became a member of the X-Men in Giant-Sized X-Men #1, penned by Wein and illustrated by Dave Cockrum.
You have to put it in context. The X-Men was never an A-category series any more than Iron Man was.
This pivotal issue signaled the start of the Bronze Age of comics and Wolverine's enduring affiliation with the team and other icons such as Storm, Colossus, Thunderbird, and Nightcrawler.
The whole X-Men idea that Roy Thomas had percolated with Len Wein. Roy Thomas was the editor-in-chief basically at that time. They wanted it all to be international in scope, so having Wolverine already be Canadian from his appearance in Hulk made sense for them to just include him.
The issue begins with Professor X needing to assemble a new team of X-Men to rescue the original members, Marvel Girl, Iceman, and Angel, excluding Beast, who had already left the team, along with recruits Havoc and Polaris, who vanished during a mission to the island of Krakoa, with Cyclops being the sole escapee. Professor X visits a government base in Quebec, where he meets Major Chase and their Weapon X. Charles offers Wolverine the opportunity to join him and become a free agent, which Wolverine immediately accepts. Chase in protest, but Wolverine resigns from duty by cutting off his tie. Once the new team is gathered, Professor X uses his telepathic powers to teach them English so they can all communicate. Despite personality clashes among the members, the new team successfully rescues the original X-Men. During the mission, the team discovers that Krakoa is not merely an island, but also a giant mutant. Together, they defeat the entity by using Polaris' power to shoot it into outer space, ending the issue with a now powerful roster of 13 X-Men. Fun fact, Gil Kane illustrated the cover artwork for this issue, but he incorrectly drew Wolverine's mask with the larger headpieces. Dave Cockrum liked Kane's accidental alteration. He thought the original was too similar to Batman's mask, and he incorporated it into his artwork for the actual story. Cockrum was also the first artist to draw Wolverine without his mask, and the distinctive hairstyle became one of the character's trademarks.
Whoa, Lucy, what's with your hair?
Even though characters introduced in the issue were well received, Marvel's X-Men still struggled with sales. The series was on the verge of cancellation when writer Chris Claremont was Len Wein's replacement in 1975.
When I came into the business in '68, we were dying. The reason why I got X-Men wasn't just that Len was leaving. It was because no one else wanted it.
Claremont and artist Dave Cockrum were tasked with revitalizing this franchise. Claremont's vision included a diverse and multi-layered team that would focus on character-driven stories that explored personal growth, relationships, and complex moral dilemmas. This approach would resonate with readers, laying the foundation for the X-Men's enduring popularity.
Readers read that, and yeah, it's finding ways to define the characters, to present them in terms that the readers can embrace and relate to with respect to their own lives. They're going through the same challenges in their lives that I am, because I'm black, or I'm Hispanic, or I'm Islamic, or I'm gay.
But as the new team took shape, it took the creators a while to recognize Wolverine's potential.
Len said in an interview one time that he thought Colossus was going to be the breakout big star of the new X-Men. And Dave Cockrum had a personal affinity for drawing Nightcrawler, so the first few issues of the new X-Men was very Nightcrawler focused in terms of little bits that were being revealed.
And because Wolverine was initially underused, favoring other members like Cyclops and Nightcrawler, Chris Claremont and Dave Cockrum considered dropping him from the lineup as the series progressed. However, Cockrum's successor, artist John Byrne, advocated for Wolverine, explaining that, as a fellow Canadian, he did not want to see a Canadian character removed.
Just a year or so later, he exploded because John Byrne, as the co-plotter and artist on X-Men, took a huge liking to Wolverine and to drawing Wolverine, which meant he started to get more and more of the attention in the X-Men book.
During this era, Chris Claremont and artist John Byrne further developed Wolverine's character, highlighting his enigmatic past, berserker rage, and struggle with his animalistic nature. They worked to transform Wolverine from a one-dimensional character into a complex anti-hero, introducing key elements like Wolverine's healing factor and his connection to samurai culture.
The original conception of Wolverine was that he was an adolescent. I took my cue from the way Dave drew the character, which seemed to me and to Dave Cockrum as a much older, more physically mature character.
The Claremont-Byrne era also established Wolverine as an older mutant and showed that his adamantium claws were part of his anatomy. Now, this contrasted with Wein's initial concept of a younger, mutated Wolverine cub from the High Evolutionary with claws apart from his uniform. And this was actually a key decision made early in Wolverine's story.
It actually wasn't until Chris Claremont and Dave Cockrum were doing the book, I think it might have been issue 99, where his claws, for the first time you saw his claws popped out of his hand, and it wasn't a machine, it wasn't cybernetic or anything like that. That was the moment where I said, oh, this guy's interesting, there's something more here.
Wolverine's claws being a part of his body set him apart from every other hero on the X-Men and every hero at Marvel Comics.
That evolved into not simply the adamantium claws coming out of his hand, but the adamantium wrapping itself around his skeletal structure. How did the people who did it get away with that? Presumably by exploiting his healing factor. So in that aspect, his power, the thing that made him special and unique among the X-team, was now responsible for his greatest liability, which is he's almost the functional equivalent of a cyborg. And then, of course, there were the next series of questions, which is where did it come from, who did it to him, why, what is the purpose, and my traditional answer to it for as long as I could get away with was none of your damn business.
And there was a point where Sabretooth was considered to be Logan's dad as well, but we're going to cover that later. Byrne modeled his depiction of Wolverine on actor Paul D'Amato, known for his role as Dr. Hook in the 1977 sports film Slapshot.
They don't call me Dr. Hook for nothing.
Byrne also designed the now classic brown and gold costume costume for Wolverine, removing the shoulder pads and tiger stripes while keeping Cochrum's distinctive cowl. Cochrum had initially attempted to introduce a new costume for Wolverine, borrowed from his adversary Fangs, in the final issue of his run. It was discarded after one issue of Byrne's tenure because both artists found drawing it particularly difficult. The classic brown and gold was introduced in X-Men 139, along with the newest team member and longtime friend, Kitty Pryde. In this issue, the team learns that Wolverine's real name is Logan. Chris Claremont chose this name, inspired by Mount Logan, Canada's tallest mountain, as an ironic contrast to Wolverine being the shortest character on the team. This new look proved so popular that Logan wore it throughout most of the 1980s and into the early 1990s. Years later, after regaining his memories, Wolverine would don this costume again in the comics and the new X-Men 97 series. Chris Claremont's initial tenure as the writer of Uncanny X-Men, which spanned from issue 94 to 279, plus numerous spin-off books, limited series, annuals, and specials, was a massive success. The series climbed from the bottom of the sales charts to become the leading title in the industry.
I can look around and see an entire industry that has been shaped and defined by what I and a few artists did. It's realizing that the work I've done has touched people that I never imagined.
Claremont is responsible for starting Jean and Logan's now famous will they won't they romantic dynamic. In his earliest appearances as an X-Man, when Wolverine was overshadowed by his teammates, his most memorable moments often involved Jean Grey.
If you were to draw any kind of parallel with Logan and Jean, you could probably look at Romeo and Juliet and say they're star-crossed lovers, right? And so it's this massively hot and not necessarily cold, but like hot and difficult relationship that is tempestuous, and that fits into the soap opera style of the X-Men. But that dynamic was so brilliantly done because, you know, you felt that relationship. I think anyone reading that for the first time loved the two characters being in love, and then things get difficult for them.
All of it was kind of icky to me. It always should have been unrequited love. That was the problem. It should have been unrequited love on Wolverine's part. Jean never should have reflected it back on him. If they had kept it as a 3 to 5 year storyline and subplots of unrequited love, then Wolverine would have come across all the more interesting and tragic as a result of it.
Now, whether you find the Jean-Logan pairing monotonous or not, the dynamic was electrifying enough to keep recurring in the comics and bleed into the cartoons and films. Personally, I find them more entertaining as a pair than Jean and Scott. Scott and Jean's energies are too similar, giving off head cheerleader and high school quarterback vibes.
Yeah, whatever.
But Claremont felt Jean and Wolverine worked well together because Logan and Phoenix both share the burden of immortality.
And why Mariko would never work for Logan as Scott would never work for Jean is that if you moved ahead 150 years, they would be dead. Love on that level for these two people is a transient act because the people they fall in love with are limited.
The Days of Future Past storyline is another Claremont Byrne era staple. The story presents a dystopian future where Sentinels hunt mutants, where most X-Men have been killed and the few survivors, including an older Wolverine, are held in internment camps. Kitty Pryde's consciousness is sent back in time to her younger self to prevent the assassination of Senator Robert Kelly by the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, which then would lead to the rise of the Sentinel program. The story is considered one of the greatest X-Men stories of all time and has influenced numerous adaptations, including the film X-Men Days of Future Past. An older Wolverine plays a key role in attempting to prevent this future, showcasing his resilience and leadership.
We started out by just, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do stupid fights. I don't want to do stupid fights. Can we make it about him?
With the 1980s marking the rise of Wolverine's popularity, solo adventures were then commissioned for him. In 1982, he starred in his first limited series, Wolverine, written by Chris Claremont and illustrated by the great Frank Miller.
If Wolverine is in a fight for his life, you can know he's not going to die. Okay, what can Frank and I do in the miniseries that is worse than actually dying? Humiliation.
This 4-issue series delved into Wolverine's time in Japan and his romantic involvement with Mariko Yoshida, adding depth to his character and unraveling more of his mysterious past. Claremont saw Wolverine as a character of duality, balancing his feral instincts with a sense of honor. He believed his complexity made Wolverine relatable and compelling. Miller also brought a noir-style aesthetic to the series, emphasizing Wolverine's gritty and darker aspects. He felt this approach resonated with readers looking for more mature comic themes. Claremont delivers a line from the first panel that would become synonymous with Marvel's most popular mutant. I'm the best there is at what I do, but what I do isn't very nice. Wolverine flies to Japan after Mariko's family hangs up on his inquiry about how she is. Now, he had met Mariko when the X-Men traveled to Agarashima, Japan. Lady Mariko Yoshida was heir to the powerful Yakuza family. Despite her initial fear, Mariko was soon comforted by Wolverine's presence, and they both fell in love. As with most romantic interests with Logan, she is marrying another man, Noboru Hideko. After arriving to check on Mariko, Logan discovers her new husband has physically abused her, and events turn violent.
He discovers that she's engaged and her fiancé has just beaten her within an inch of his life.
Logan intended to kill Mariko's husband, but was drugged and challenged to a duel of wooden swords by her father, Lord Shingen.
But then he goes up against Shingen Yashida, and the guy, oh, well, you have, like, adamantium claws. This isn't a fair fight. Okay, I'll fight you with bow sticks. Shingen beats the living daylights out of him because he's a better fighter. He's a better villain than Wolverine is.
Unsheathing his claws in desperation, Logan was further beaten and deemed an animal.
All he's interested in is teaching Wolverine a message, a lesson. He humiliates him.
Logan was then cast into the streets where Yukio rescued him. She later became his close friend and occasional lover. After being attacked by the Hand, Yukio manipulates Logan into helping her, leading to further embarrassment in front of Mariko. Realizing the deceit, Logan killed Lord Shingen in a duel after Yukio killed Mariko's husband. Mariko gives Logan the Clan Yoshida Masune sword. With her father and husband dead, Mariko becomes head of Clan Yoshida, and they announce their engagement. Now, before the wedding, Viper and Mariko's half-brother, Silver Samurai, poisons the X-Men. Logan fights for control of Clan Yoshida. He initially resents Rogue, but respects her after she saves Mariko from Viper. Now, due to family honor and Mastermind's manipulations, Mariko and Logan become estranged. Mariko returns to the sword, stating that she needs to sever her clan's criminal ties before they can remarry.
Man, this guy has the worst luck with the ladies.
I know, buddy. So this story arc would be loosely adapted into the 2013 live-action film The Wolverine, directed by James Mangold and starring Hugh Jackman as Logan. And speaking of adaptations, Wolverine's first leap from page to small screen came in Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, where he appeared in a few episodes. Voiced by William Calloway, this early version of Wolverine was a far cry from the character that we would come to know. For one thing, his accent was Australian.
How you doing? Want a piece of fruit?
And the portrayal lacked the depth and ferocity that readers had come to know the Canadian for. Just why? The creative team aimed to introduce Wolverine to a broader audience, leveraging his popularity from the comics. However, his portrayal was limited by the constraints of early 1980s children's television, which often toned down more violent, complex aspects of comic book characters. The miniseries was followed by the 6-issue Kitty Pryde and Wolverine, with Claremont again taking the helm as writer and Al Milgrom as the illustrator. Claremont crafted a fresh new perspective on Kitty Pryde and Wolverine. Previously depicted as a sweet and innocent kid sister to the older X-Men, Kitty Pryde is shown grappling with teenager self-doubt and self-deprecation, searching for her soul and undergoing a coming-of-age transformation. Wolverine, meanwhile, is immersed in the honor-driven, mystical Japanese culture, transitioning from the X-Men's campy hard man to a grim and gritty character. Artist Al Milgrom adapted his drawing style to match the dark and personal nature of the story, using bolder and more dynamic strokes. He was ultimately very satisfied with the project.
It was perfect.
After 6 issues, Claremont takes Kitty Pryde from her breakup with Colossus in Uncanny X-Men 183, putting her through trials and confronting her inner demons and leading to her emergence as a stronger character. Claremont contrasts her journey with the battle-hardened Wolverine, establishing a platonic brother and sister-like relationship. This dynamic would become a recurring theme for Wolverine and his young female sidekicks, Jubilee being another one. We even see this same dynamic used to introduce Wolverine to a wider audience in the movie X-Men. He befriends a young runaway, Rogue, and in the movie, he feels no attachment to the X-Men team, but he stays with them in order to help her. So by pairing Wolverine with younger women, the audience sees that he is not just a mindless killing machine. He is a protector of the innocent. The same dynamic is what led to his heroic death in Logan, but more on that later. The series also solidified Kitty's superhero identity, settling on her costume and adopting the codename Shadowcat, which she would use from then on. On a roll, another Wolverine solo series, Wolverine, launched in 1988 and ran for 189 issues until 2003. Written initially by Chris Claremont and illustrated by John Buscema, the series delved into Logan's exploits as a lone warrior in his battles with inner demons, and with Sabretooth. Sabretooth is Wolverine's arch enemy, his Joker, his Green Goblin. Now, they have similar powers, but Sabretooth represents the brutal savagery that Logan fights so hard to keep at bay. There's a point also where Sabretooth was considered to be Logan's dad as well.
Everything that I've done with Sabretooth was based on my conception of him, which is that he was Wolverine's father. His mother she's an angel. Half of Wolverine is angelic, which is the side of his room that's pristine. And the reason he embraced Japanese samurai ethos, or at least his perception of it, is because it was pure.
In Wolverine Volume 2, Number 10, in the seedy Madripoor bar, Logan reflects on past traumas involving his love, Silver Fox, and his nemesis, Sabretooth. Sabretooth has been intertwined with Wolverine's life for an extensive period. Although not blood-related to Wolverine, as the first film suggests, both share comparable powers and are products of the Weapon X program. However, while Wolverine strives to restrain the beast within, Sabretooth fully embraces it. Flashbacks reveal a violent confrontation in which Sabretooth admits to killing Silver Fox, sparking Logan's uncontrollable rage. The murder of Silver Fox was the first of Sabretooth's birthday surprises, where every year he tracks down Logan and tries to kill him on his birthday. This reminds Logan that even as he puts the years behind him, his past is never too far behind. And even as Logan becomes a hero, he can never escape his past as a murderer.
Sabretooth kills him every year on his birthday because he wants Wolverine to fight back. And Wolverine, of course, being a pissy adolescent, deep down inside, is like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to stand here and let you beat the shit out of me because that's me.
Claremont wasn't the only one making his mark with Wolverine. Barry Windsor Smith entered the fray in 1991 with his miniseries Weapon X.
I can see why Jim Shooter said yes, because no editor would be stupid enough to refuse Barry when he walks in with 32 pages that he did on spec.
Barry chose to explore Wolverine's origin story, detailing his time in the Weapon X program and the process that gave him his adamantium skeleton. It is a gritty and intense examination of Wolverine's traumatic past. In the Weapon X storyline, Logan, aka Wolverine, gets kidnapped by a secret government program called Weapon X. They put him through brutal experiments, bonding unbreakable adamantium to his skeleton and turning him into an almost indestructible weapon. The scientists, led by Dr. Cornelius, Dr. Hines, and the cruel professor, strip away Logan's humanity with cold precision. As they transform him, Logan endures horrific physical and psychological torture designed to make him a mindless killing machine, erasing most of his memories and leaving him in a primal rage. Eventually, his animal instincts and healing powers kick in, allowing him to escape the facility. In a feral state, Wolverine goes on a rampage, killing many of his captors as he tries to reclaim his sense of self and his humanity.
For me, the first seminal work was Weapon X. And I took that as a metaphor for, assault, basically, for sexual assault and rape. That he had basically had a substance put inside him against his wishes, and he had been abused, and he had been through this terrible ordeal, and he'd come out the other side. And so the power of the story really is about what happens when you get taken and abused and misused, and sort of like you have to fight back.
Windsor Smith was given significant creative control over this project. He wrote, illustrated, and even colored the series, ensuring a unified vision. This level of control is relatively rare in mainstream comics, allowing Windsor Smith to realize his artistic and narrative vision fully. Weapon X garnered critical acclaim for its mature storytelling and intricate artwork. It is frequently hailed as one of the greatest Wolverine stories and a landmark in comic book history, celebrated for its psychological depth and exploration of its themes of humanity.
So did Logan ever go back with the X-Men?
Oh yeah, for sure, Doug. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, Wolverine remained central to many major story arcs in the X-Men comics. In a now classic issue, Madripoor Nights, by Claremont and illustrator Jim Lee, Wolverine meets Captain America for the first time in the summer of 1941, when they team up to fight the Hands Ninja Warriors. Madripoor, the most laid-back place in the Marvel Universe, played a big role in Wolverine's life. It was a key setting in his second solo series, Wolverine. Wolverine Origins number 16 would revisit this issue later, shedding light on various subplots involving Baron Strucker and the Hands Alliance. Also, fun fact, the comic appears in Weird Al's White and Nerdy.
I've been browsing, inspecting X-Men comics, I collect them.
That's my jam.
Person, please stop.
Sorry. Anyways, so another epic crossover event was Fatal Attractions. Now, this 1993 crossover, written by Fabian Nisia and Scott Lobel, and used as a reference in X-Men 97, commemorated the 30th anniversary of Marvel's X-Men.
It was a little bit of a messy time in terms of creative stability. They didn't know when like Jim and Rob and Bill were going to be leaving to do their image work. So there was a few month period there where it was all really kind of mushy. To this day, 30 years later, I was never officially offered the X-Men book. So I had to hit the ground running with a 3-title, 9-part crossover. still not technically officially the writer of X-Men, just writing it for 5-6 months, especially during this multi-title crossover.
In this massive issue, the Acolytes, a group of mutant soldiers led by Fabian Cortez, attack Camp Hayden, the headquarters for Project Wide Awake, which is defended by X-Factor. Simultaneously, Exodus approaches X-Force with an offer of sanctuary from Magneto, who is revealed to be alive and in control of Avalon, a retrofitted version of Cable's base, Greymalkin. Cable manages to save the sentient computer Professor, but fails to destroy Avalon, barely escaping with his life. Magneto and the Acolytes then crash Illyana Rasputin's funeral, prompting Colossus to join them in his grief. The UN activates the Magneto Protocols, causing Magneto to retaliate with an electromagnetic pulse that disrupts global electronics. Professor X, with the team including Jean Grey, Gambit, Rogue, Quicksilver, and Wolverine, infiltrates Avalon, disables it with a virus, and battles Magneto, who rips the adamantium from Wolverine's skeleton, which leads to Professor X mind-wiping Magneto into a coma. As the X-Men return to Earth, Wolverine regains consciousness in time to save Jean Grey from being sucked out of their turbulent ship, revealing his new bone claws.
The idea came out of a writers' meeting. I think we were out in Glen Cove, Long Island for an X summit.
But it was X-Factor writer Peter David who finally had the idea.
Magneto has fought Wolverine a million times already. Why doesn't he just rip his adamantium out of him? And everyone sort of said, wow, that's really interesting, because it opened up a lot of questions that were worth answering.
This revelation meant the claws were always a part of Wolverine's anatomy, just covered in metal, adding a new layer to his backstory and powers.
So the idea of making it bone claws then allowed you to explore Wolverine's background more, his origins, what he remembers or doesn't remember. I believe back then even he was surprised that he had bone claws.
This moment also pushed Wolverine into a feral state, reflecting the deep trauma and shock of losing his adamantium. Wolverine temporarily departs from the X-Men, embarking on a series of adventures during which his healing factor returns. Due to his feral nature, his mutation process will eventually cause him to degenerate physically into a more primitive, beast-like state. Fans saw a raw, more animalistic side of Logan as he struggled to cope without his metal skeleton. The shift highlighted his resilience, adaptability, and constant battle with his primal instincts. Wolverine's healing factor, training, and bone...
So my guest today is Matt Taibbi, one of the few actual journalists left in the world, and I was looking forward to this conversation. It wasn't going to be tied to the news, but it turns out that a lot of news has happened in the last 24 hours, and even as this recording is happening within hours of it, that I can't help but make that the focus of what we're about to discuss. The first is the appearance that the FBI has, big surprise, not been honest with the public. Certainly not fully straightforward based on some recent facts that we've learned about what they know about the Trump would-be assassin, or the person who at least attempted the assassination on Donald Trump. What we've learned still in real time coming out is that at least Gab, one of the organizations, social media networks that received an emergency document request from the FBI, suggested that they knew or believed that the account that belonged to Crooks, the alleged assassin, actually was posting very different things than what the FBI publicly stated. So it's interesting to get to the bottom of what's going on there. And it's all against the backdrop of a week where leveling the term weird has become the Democrats' principal political strategy, which I think is actually not only a little bit weird in its own right, but more importantly, it's anti-American at its core, and rankles me in ways that I think we ought to discuss in greater depth than just knee-jerk reactions. So a lot to talk about, but instead of the usual conversation we were about to have, Matt, I'll bring on my guest, Matt Taibbi, who I had a chance to meet recently at the Republican convention. We struck up conversation, and this is an outgrowth and a follow-up to that. But Matt, welcome to my podcast, and I'm excited to chat with you about some subjects that might have been a little bit different than what we were planning on.
No, thanks for having me on, and good to see you again, Mr. Ramaswamy. That was a pleasure to meet you last week, or I guess it was 2 weeks ago now.
A couple weeks ago, yeah. Time flies. So what do you make of this? You know, obviously we don't have all of the facts yet, but the appearance that we didn't really get necessarily the full truth of what the FBI knew, or even what their full beliefs were. What do you make of that? And in particular, from your vantage point as a longer-time journalist studying government transparency, that's the heart of a political journalist, how does this fit into a broader history of what we know about how the government really does or doesn't tell the truth to us about issues of public importance?
Well, I think it says a lot about a lot of things, actually. You know, the FBI has transformed itself into a different kind of organization, really since the beginning of the War on Terror years. After the hearings in the 70s about the reform of the intelligence community, the FBI essentially became almost entirely a law enforcement agency. It could not conduct investigations without some kind of predicate that had to demonstrate that. That changed really in the Bush years. There was a series of directives that allowed them to essentially conduct investigations without any real important cause. And the agency has really become much more of a counterintelligence, intelligence gathering agency as opposed to a law enforcement body that just investigates crimes and tries to gather evidence. So when they give
basically a general purpose investigative agency as opposed to responsive to a particular alleged violation of the law. That's what you're saying, which is absolutely, I think, spot on. But that's what you're saying.
Yes, and the problem for us as journalists is that the FBI, I mean, I've dealt with them a few times over the years, the FBI, DOJ. Once upon a time, if they could, they would give you information, but it would always be, here's what we found out, here's what evidence we can disclose. They were not being political very often in the way that they would disseminate information. That wasn't really part of their mission. That wasn't the way they wanted to be perceived either. Now, in the wake of the Trump assassination, there's this crazy symbiosis between a press that doesn't really do any work and the FBI, which issues these completely nonsensical, off-the-record statements. Well, they'll tell people, like, we've done 100 interviews, but we have absolutely no information about what the possible motive is, which is completely impossible. Anybody who's done 100 interviews with people who've known the suspect will have some kind of idea.
They have a theory, at least.
Yeah, they'll have a theory, and now this new thing where they affirmatively tell the public they're trying to convince us that crooks had anti-immigrant views when that contradicts the actual evidence. That tells you that this is a politicized body, and that's a very scary thing for people because it has ramifications beyond just the news.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that the deeper issue that animates sort of my own pursuits, whatever they are, going forward, is the people we elect to run the government are absolutely not the ones running the government today, which creates a complete loss of accountability that rejects the project of the American Revolution. But as it relates to the FBI in particular, I actually agree with almost all of your telling of it. The only part where I depart from this as a student of the history of this institution is actually the idea that it began this pivot in the aftermath of 9/11 and the Bush-Cheney new neoconservative national security state. I think you're right about the shift from being an investigator of a specific alleged crime or an enforcer or an enforcement body to being a general purpose investigative unit. I think that that's largely accurate as I understand it as well. There's a longer history, though, that the lawless nature of the culture of the institution, one that views the law as a constraint rather than a motivator. Let me just put it that way, right? It's one thing if you're a law enforcement body, maybe you view the law as your motivation. Your motivation as an organization, your organizational raison d'etre, reason for existence, is to enforce the law. That might be what most Americans think is the purpose of federal law enforcement. But it's a different thing if you have a federal law enforcement body that views the law as a constraint and inconvenience on its behavior, but its reason for existence is something else altogether. That, I don't think, is just uniquely true post the Bush years, though it's true certainly after the Bush years. That dates back to J. Edgar Hoover and an FBI that largely has existed the way that you and I know it probably is, probably the closer to the better part of a century.
Yeah, I should have been clear. I mean, I meant sort of post-church committee hearings.
Okay.
So in the 70s, I mean, but you're right, absolutely. If you go back to the 60s, the politicized surveillance of, American politicians, infiltration of dissident groups, all kinds of things that have nothing to do with law enforcement. J. Edgar Hoover building files on, Oppo files on every politician that came up through the pipeline. That's absolutely part of the Bureau's history. I just think, after the 70s, I got to know some FBI agents over the years, a lot of people who were kind of like, more on the traditional investigatory, bank robbery side, right? Like that that kind of stuff. And they saw their jobs as being basically cop jobs. And then there was a disenchantment, and I've known some people more recently who left the FBI, who don't like this new direction that the Bureau is taking, where they're going very heavily in the direction of just counterintelligence. One agent talked to me about having to post up outside of some January 6th defendant's house. He's like, look, this is a misdemeanor crime. I could be out there doing,
Oh, this is interesting. This is an actual kind of off-the-record sort of journalistic conversation you've had with somebody who was actually...
On the record, actually. Oh, really? I've had a few of them, yeah. So I interviewed a whole bunch of FBI agents. When some of them became whistleblowers and testified in the House, I guess it was a couple of years ago now.
I see.
I interviewed guys like Steve Friend. I went down to visit him, talked to some other folks. But I've known FBI people going back to 9/11. And there's been frustration for a lot of reasons, just the changes within the Bureau. There's been this tension, but now, the Bureau is completely a different organization.
Yeah, and anybody who might at least have visceral doubts about the kinds of views you're sharing here or views I've shared, I just say history is actually a pretty interesting lens through which to view the present. There's actually a pretty cool book. I don't know if you've read it. My wife is the one who got me on it. It's called G-Man. Have you read that book?
No. It sounds interesting. Is it a history of Europe?
Yeah, it's the history of the Bureau, history of J. Edgar Hoover particularly. And it's not some politicized screed. I think the author's this woman, Beverly Gage. She's a Yale historian. It won a Pulitzer. It's just a pretty down the fairway, very interesting, detail-rich account of a lot of the history of this institution that, once you read that, all of the things that you would think that are unimaginable are not only true, right. It's far more expansive than you could ever imagine, which then raises the question of, why one, and it's not a left or right thing, but why one would believe that at this unique point in history, the very institution that was built, and institutions have a culture about them. It's still the J. Edgar Hoover building of the FBI, for example, that's their main office in D.C. Why it is you would believe that in this moment, the unthinkable is something that actually has been the normal part of the history of this institution for, a century. It causes you to sort of check some of your own present-oriented biases. But anyway, put that aside. I just recommend that as a book that I think is pretty cool.
I like it. G-Man, I'll take a look.
Yeah, just take a look. You don't have to read the whole thing, but you'll get a good amount even just reading through some of it.
The enemy is putting up a lot of
I guess my question is, in your own experience, because you have been certainly a journalist and observer of the relationship between government and its citizenry for a longer period of time than I have. I took a detour away from paying attention to these issues. I was in the world of business for a while, kind of come back to it now. What is your estimation of the scale of abuse, right? Civil libertarian abuse through non-transparency going along with that in the immediate post-9/11 aftermath, sort of in the Bush years, versus where we are today? Forget the partisan nature of which way it leans, but more just the magnitude or the magnitude of concern about the lawlessness or the fundamental absence of commitment to being constrained by the rule of law. How would you rate that in the 2000s versus your estimation of where we are today? I'm curious.
There's only limited evidence to go on, and I think it's a great question, but my sense is that it's epidemic now, and that it wasn't maybe even 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Okay.
But we've had stories come out in the Trump era that have suggested all kinds of problems. I think you can see with the unmasking requests with FISA, right? That's sort of domestic political surveillance, abuse of that system. We'd already seen that there were massive violations of FISA, going back to Inspector General reports, even dating back to the Bush era. But now it seems like that system's completely out of control. The Twitter files showed that the FBI is engaging in wholesale meddling in the domestic speech environment. They're representing to the public that they're worried about foreign interference, but it was part of the shock that we all felt when we were looking through those emails. Like, why are they doing this? So I think there's all kinds of problems. And this thing that happened today is just, it's another example of, wow, they're really getting involved in domestic politics in a way that I don't remember happening in my lifetime.
So it's funny you bring up the domestic interference, right, in our own body politic. Think about the TikTok debate, right? The debate about whether to ban TikTok. And first they'll say it's not a ban or whatever it is. But anyway, the premise was we don't want foreign governmental interference in our own domestic politics or our own domestic polity, what tilts the scales of what people can or can't see. And yet, if you go back to that era, this goes back to one of your, obviously hallmark contributions in the last several years, which is the Twitter files. But if you look back at what happened there, was there a government-coordinated cover-up job on a question such as the origin of COVID-19 from China? Yes. Was China protected from public understanding of where COVID-19 likely originated? Yes. Was the public protected or restricted from seeing that information by a government actor using these tech companies as a backdoor to effectuate it? Yes. But it wasn't really the CCP and TikTok. It was actually, in that particular case, the U.S. government effectively pressuring U.S.-based companies through the back door to not only censor all kinds of information, but in this particular instance, one that actually had the effect of protecting the CCP from its own accountability.
What up, Zella? What's happening?
A reversal of what our own expectations are, where I guess the way I would say it, Matt, is we tend to be far more alert as a people to some sort of foreign government messing around with us. And I say this as a citizen who doesn't want some foreign government meddling in what I can or cannot do on my own soil of my homeland. But we somehow give our own government the same pass that we otherwise aren't willing to give foreign governments, when in fact, when you think about the threats to our own civil liberties or access to information, the greater threats, I think undoubtedly, are emerging from our own managerial state rather than some other foreign government, which, small though that threat may be by comparison, it's the one that we disproportionately pay attention to. And I'd just be curious for your take on whether you think that balance is right.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I lived in Russia for 11 years.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I forgot that. Okay.
Yeah, and so I was always confronted by, Russians have no illusions about what the various institutions of the government are for. They don't think that, the GRU or the SVR or the FSB, that these are just law enforcement bodies. They know exactly what the deal is. When you talk about like the Secret Service or what the Interior Ministry does, they understand that abuses happen and they know basically where they're coming from, and they have this kind of sanguine understanding of what government does. Americans are completely they have this sort of almost virginal belief in the purity of their system, or I think it's eroding now quickly. But I remember Russians just laughing at me when I would describe, for instance, what the FBI or CIA did, or rules that we were allegedly followed. Like, how naive are you? And so this whole period, I think in the Trump era, for me as a journalist, it's been disillusioning. I think for the general public, it has been too. I mean, you brought up the COVID situation. When we were doing the Twitter files, we found evidence that of the government trying from multiple angles to influence the COVID story. They did it through the Virality Project, which was sponsored by a number of different government agencies through Stanford. There was the Global Engagement Center, which is a wing. Technically, it's part of the State Department, but it was pressuring Twitter to take down certain posts that it didn't like. It sent them lists of 6,000 accounts that it wanted taken off the platform. There was pressure from the DHS, pressure from the FBI. I mean, it was coming from all different angles, and for me, it was shocking. Like, I remember growing up, it was a big story when the FBI wrote one letter to the record company that put out NWA, asking them not to, not to put out a certain single. And here you have thousands of these letters, right? So it's a completely different ballgame, and Americans haven't caught up to that yet. They haven't. It hasn't registered.
Do you think? I mean, there's just an interesting. It's rare that you get to talk to somebody who spent 11 years in Russia as a journalist. That's pretty fascinating.
Yes.
So I've never been to Russia. So in some ways, I don't want to exaggerate my level of knowledge here to draw this theory. But do you think this is a matter of I'm going to offer it as a theory, and you tell me whether you think it's just true or off the wall? Do you think that in some ways, right? I'm going to assume that the magnitude of government overreach from legal or constitutional constraint, like the amount of that overreach is far greater in Russia in the time you spent there than here. I'll assume that as a baseline. But do you think that even against that backdrop, the danger to the citizenry might actually in certain ways be worse here because we are conditioned not to already be in on the game, right? In a certain sense, you watch the movie The Lives of Others or whatever, like it's kind of a depressing state when you've seen that movie? It's like,
absolutely, yes. It's a great movie.
Right.
East German,
it's like an all-time great. It's like an awesome, well done, not too heavy, not on the nose, but just like there's a certain existential melancholy where you just know that like you're being surveilled, but you just sort of accepted it. So
I actually think that's an important movie for Americans to watch.
Oh, it's such an important. I can't even remember. Is the movie in English or not? I can't even remember.
I think it's in German.
It landed so much in your heart that you even forget the medium of transmission. It's that good. I think it might have been in German. But anyway, it's like what East Germany was like, back in the day. But here, we don't have that melancholy spirit. But in a certain sense, we're just then like oblivious that maybe the magnitude of government overreach beyond the limits of legal constitutional restraint are greater in Russia, but people know what's going on, so there's no lie, right? There's no fundamental dishonesty. But the sleight of hand, in some ways, actually leaves us, through the blitheness of our ignorance or willful blindness to our own government's non-zero overreaches, actually in some ways is more liberty restraining just because of the sheer absence of knowledge of it. Is that a bridge too far, or do you think that that's not a crazy point?
I think you're absolutely right. So when I first went to Russia, I went as a 19-year-old. I'm old enough that I actually studied during the Soviet era. So I went to a Soviet institute.
When was this? Just a time mark of this. You were
1989.
1989. Okay, got it.
Yep. So when I got there, I remember this very vividly. There was a Russian student in my dorm, and he had bought a newspaper, and I was curious what he was reading, and he's like, "Oh, I didn't buy this to read." He went upstairs, and he was stuffing his winter coat with the pages of the newspaper because he wanted extra insulation. Nobody read Soviet newspapers. They used them
insulation.
Yeah, exactly. They used them for other things. They covered their windows to keep the sunlight out, or they put them in the bottoms of bird cages. It was the idea of reading a newspaper and actually expecting to get real information out of it was laughable to even people who were I would say good communists, right? Like people who believed in the system. They were like, yeah, whatever. We don't have that in America. We are not conditioned to look at our systems of media with the same kind of suspicion that is drilled into people who've lived in a society like that, and they know how it works. We think we have this very functional free press, and I think we did have a very relatively strong press for a long time. It's just that it's slid so much in the last 10 years, and we're in this place where, as you say, Americans are they're defenseless against this kind of thing because they've never seen it before, or they don't think they have. And so I think you're right. It's that, and also, the American intelligence services and our systems of media, we're just much more powerful, sophisticated. They have more resources than a country like Russia does to pull off certain things. So that's why I'd worry here.
Yeah, I mean, the best case scenario is you have a constitution and you follow it. The worst case scenario is that well, I guess we could debate what the worst case scenario is. Is the worst case scenario that you have no constitution, you don't follow it, or that you do have one and you don't follow it? Because in a certain sense,
I mean, it could be either, right?
Yeah, you can actually make the case for the latter. which is sort of
Stalin.
Yeah, absolutely. So what were attitudes towards Stalin, by the way, when you were there, right? So we were talking 89 through the 90s. That's an interesting thing to bring up.
So there were a few sort of holdovers, like every May Day, there were a few Stalinists who would come out, but the average Soviet citizen was, I would say, pretty cosmopolitan. They would listen to Voice of America, and they liked European pop culture and all that. And once the wall fell, and they were able to experience Western culture, they caught up pretty quickly, I would say. And by the way, the Russian free press, for the brief period that they had it, kind of between 1990 and when Putin took over.
And you would think it was like, you would call that a free press, yeah.
Well, it was a dangerous free press, right?
Nonetheless, it was, you mean that's when you were a journalist there, right? So, yeah.
Yes, but reporters were being shot, blown up, beaten all the time, even before Putin. But they were great journalists. I mean, they had really excellent investigative journalism during that 10-year period, and they caught up very quickly. But the thing that the lasting impression for me is just that when those rights went away, when they were unable to do that anymore, it doesn't come back. And I think that's another thing the Americans don't realize, is that when this stuff ends, you can't just turn on a switch and go back to having a free press again. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, interesting. How does it work?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it goes away and it stays away.
Right?
Right, yeah.
The cultural expectation and demand for it in some ways is dampened too.
That's probably true all over the world. I mean, I don't know. That's my only experience, but I would imagine.
Do you think that actually raises an interesting question right now? Is like, as much as we complain about, people like you and I maybe at least complain about some of the governmental abuses and everything you see in the Twitter files, the backdoor government action to evade accountability, is part of the problem anymore that actually the ordinary citizenry just doesn't actually maybe care as much as we once might have, right? Like that might have been the greatest check on government power, is a citizenry that actually cared about its liberties. Did you sense a greater sense of, it's a vast generalization, but a greater sense of acceptance or a greater sense of agnosticism to say, okay, well, I'd still rather be controlled in this way as long as I'm getting the advertisements I want to look at and my life is a little bit more convenient. And if part of this trade-off is I don't have to pay a monthly credit card fee to access these platforms, if the rest of this is just part of what I'm trading off in that bargain, like, I guess I don't love it, but I'm kind of cool with it, and I'm certainly not going to start an American Revolution over it in a way that our founding fathers might have in 1776.
Well, so it's frustrating for me. So I grew up kind of, I was a lifelong Democrat. I gave to the ACLU my whole life. Everybody, I didn't really know conservatives growing up. I grew up in Boston. I'm one of those.
What did your parents do?
My father was also a reporter. My mother is a lawyer.
Okay.
But free speech was everything. On the left once upon a time. I mean, think about all the pop culture stuff. People versus Larry Flint, the Mapplethorpe story. I mean, every single sort of political thriller, the villain was a speech-suppressing Republican, and the hero was the civil liberties lawyer.
That's right.
Right? Fresh out of college and all that. And somewhere between like the Bush years and now, all the people who had those beliefs completely flipped. They changed their attitude towards the First Amendment. Like, people would have done anything to protect it, I feel like, 20, 30 years ago. And that's all gone. Now, you see, it's been kind of amazing and heartening for me to see that, conservatives are up in arms about threats to the Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
And, I'm glad they are. They need to be. If they weren't, I think the situation would be so much worse right now.
I think my assessment, I mean, speaking as someone, right of center, myself, ran Republican candidate for president, Republican, whatever that label means. I think I would say that the left's abandonment of its interest in free speech protection is far more pronounced than the conservative embrace of it. Okay, which I think is
oh, that's interesting.
So it's just like a net loss for the country. It's like it's not like a flip flop. You have one flip for sure. It's a decided flip. Like I think that the commitment to free speech is no longer a Democrat or liberal or progressive value in America. To the contrary, if you had to pick what the progressive value is, it is the protectionist instinct, information protectionist instinct to the public to say that too much free speech is actually going to be dangerous. I think that is a committed now left-wing position where the committed left-wing principal position used to be free exchange of ideas. I think on the conservative side, I think you've seen part of this is like, okay, well, if they're doing that, then, you know, it's a reactionary response. Second is conservatives, it so happens in the latest iteration of it. Study history, it hasn't always been this way, but the latest iteration have been the victims of it, so then there's a reactionary response there too. But I think it is an open question, if I'm being, you know, kind of calling it straight from where I see it, of what the modern conservative movement's actual push come to shove level of commitment to true free speech actually is. I am on the right as a, I would say, unapologetic, unrestrained advocate for making this part of the Republican Party's vision and platform. That's the Republican Party for the modern conservative movement. But I think it is an open question, right, how committed they are. So I think it's just a dead weight loss where the left has abandoned it and the right has not totally embraced it, but it's partially embraced it, which I'm glad about. And I do think it's heartening. But I just think that an honest appraisal of where we are, I think that's what it is.
So it's interesting that you say that because there is a schism, right? We just saw, Mike Johnson pass the FISA enhancements bill, which is something that,
Thank you for calling it the enhancement. It's not a reauthorization. It was an expansion. That's what it was.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the free speech folks were very upset about that. And I agree with you. I think there's an opportunity here, not just like a moral duty, but there's an opportunity politically for the Republicans to own this issue. To be champions of something that's always been popular in America. Americans, this is a core value of this country. One of the reasons that we never had this happen before is because Republicans and Democrats, people just didn't like, meddling with the basics of the First Amendment. That just, it was politically not terribly possible, right?
It's part of who you are, it's your identity, right? So you're just, all the other stuff just doesn't matter if you don't have a First Amendment left, right?
Yes, and I think it's very much part of the American character. We're an outspoken people. We don't like to be told what to do, what to think.
We're weird. We're weird. I'll get to that in a second. We Americans are weird, right? All of us. That's who we are.
Weird.
That's
funny.
Right.
That's right. We like that. So yeah, and conversely, the other thing is just not in our tradition, and the bulk of people are not going to be for that, because the idea of having a vanguard class that decides what you can and cannot see, what you're smart enough or able enough to handle, like, it's so insulting to the bulk of people. I think getting on the other side of that only makes political sense.
Yeah, I mean, it makes political sense. I think it does, but I just think it makes like normative sense. Like, it's who we are, right? So if no one's defending this, like, we have to defend the essence of what this country is. It's in the First Amendment for a reason. You get to say anything. Say anything means you get to express any opinion, right? I can't sell you, a medicine bottle and say it's not poison when it is, or whatever. Commercial fraud is not the expression of an opinion, or the issuance of a physical threat is not an opinion.
Right.
But the expression of an opinion, any opinion goes. Which, though, if we're really prepared to, if you will, swallow that pill, I think, and burning the flag is protected speech, right? I think the campus protests, even standing up for heinous views of Hamas or whoever, you're expressing that opinion. You're not free to commit violence. You're not free to physically obstruct people from going to classrooms. But the expression of the opinion is kind of, if it doesn't feel unfortunate at times, you're not doing it right. It is protected speech. And so I do think that is a question where I think conservatives are really grappling with where we land. And I'm not sure that it's going to be unified necessarily. I think that we live in a moment where there are sort of weird alliances, even if we're unwilling to admit that in the open, between people who may think they're on the left or on the right on some of these questions relating to, from foreign interventionist policy to the domestic surveillance state. I think those are probably some of the biggest areas for some realignments that I think are still very much in process, actually.
I mean, don't you think that traditional ideas of left and right are kind of meaningless now?
Right now they're meaningless. It does feel pretty meaningless right now. I feel like it's going to land in a new equilibrium, but we're not at all in like a stable equilibrium right now. I think we're in a moment of real shift, actually, real movement. And I think it's fascinating. It's an exciting time to be, an observer and participant, if I may say, I guess, in this. I find it's more interesting that way, rather than once it's sort of settled. Partly
it is. It's scary a little bit, but it's also interesting. I mean, like, if you're an anti-war advocate now, which party do you support? I mean, it's confusing, right? I mean,
if either, right? Or maybe you can be a force for change within either, too. I think. And actually, I'd say if you're a true civil libertarian, I think right now that is undoubtedly, I think, more of a Republican view, or you find more of a home in the Republican Party. But that itself is a real. I mean, even in the Republican primary, some of the people I'm running against, was running against at the time, was a real source of ideological division even within a party, and I think that makes it just an interesting time to be American politics. Actually, of course, absolutely. Of course, it makes you a pretty weird guy for raising that. We'll come back to that. What do you think of this Democratic strategy of sort of labeling the Republican Party and Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and whatever? That's just weird. What's your reaction to that? What's your guttural response to that?
So I'm on the. I get the DNC talking points mailers, right? They send out these little email lists.
Oh, really? All right.
Yeah. I mean,
here's our talking points.
Yeah. Well, they call them talkers. They're publicly available. Anybody can find them.
Yeah.
But they send them out, and
Here's
yesterday, they had a story yesterday where the headline was, I think it was J.D. Vance and his Silicon Valley billionaire weirdos want to cut taxes. Before that, it was, Vance is downright weird was in the headline. And then, almost on cue, you'll see, every Democratic politician using that phrase. But the really damning thing for me is seeing all of the people in the media use the same words. And, you just can't have that. It's such a bad look for the news media to not appear to be independent from a
play along
party.
With the talkers, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, okay, fine. If a politician wants to do that, that's their job. But reporters, I'm not going to use some word that you scripted for me. Are you kidding? Like, that's ridiculous. And so that's what this sort of comic compilations that you've seen. I think Dave Rubin posted it today, right? Of everybody using that word. They must know how absurd it is.
Oh my gosh, it's not credible.
So, why did they do it? I mean, who's being convinced by that? I guess it's a very interesting question.
I think it comes back to this question of who's being convinced by that. I think part of the problem, Matt, might be that, like, a good number of people are convinced by it, actually. And I just think the problem comes back. People like you and I are often so focused on, like, institutional failure that we forget just broader, pervasive civic failure of our citizenry. It's like, Jefferson's famous quote, you get the government the government you deserve is the government you elect, and the government you elect is the government you deserve. And in some sense, like, I think that the fact that people do fall for it is kind of what makes it work, is a sort of kind of pervasive laziness and, like, lethargic tendency in the American civic spirit right now. I don't mean to be a downer about it, but I just think that kind of is true even outside of institutional failure.
I guess so. I mean, there's just so much of that now. I mean,
it's probably self-fulfilling too. It recycles,
But again, I grew up a Democrat. Democrats, once upon a time, they used to pride themselves on being independent thinkers.
Right.
The prototypical great Democrat was a stand-up comic, right? Like that. It was somebody who had fresh material, used brash language. Now you have this thing where everybody's like a herd animal. Like I remember reading, zoologists talking about how when 51% of the deer decide to bolt, they all go, right? Like that's how this weird thing happens. It's just somebody gets a cue, everybody goes. There are no holdouts. The entire like news media environment speaks as one voice, and it's just embarrassing. It's just a terrible look. But
embarrassing is like probably the right word, especially you coming from that profession. It is sort of embarrassing.
Can you imagine Cy Hirsch doing that and saying, he's really weird? Are you?
Yeah,
you more prep?
It's just like you're just like I'm going to tell you what I think, not regurgitate what somebody else thinks. So that's on the media aspect, which I think is a great point, actually. I mean, if you look at the number of times within a concentrated 48-hour window that individual word has been used, it's not even like they use other words like bizarre, right? It's just like that word. Sticking to that word does reflect that type of weird conformity. Now, like on the content of it, because I'm also just interested. I've been reflecting on this.
So why did they do it?
Yeah. Why did they do it? But not even from a political analysis, just like from my own opinion about it, is I think it is an argument of the wrong kind, right? It is a disappointing form of American political argument today, because it's actually just anti-exceptionalism, right? It's against exceptionalism on its own terms. Like a guy like Pete Buttigieg, when I saw him on the weekend, right, on one of these shows, talking about J.D. Vance, Donald Trump is weird, it just felt disappointing to me, right? Because this is a guy I knew in college. He was old. He was a senior when I was a freshman, so I knew him and knew of him better than he knew of me. But I remember being like, okay, I respect this guy. He wasn't somebody who would say, okay, somebody who disagrees with me is weird. And yet, part of the reason why is he was obviously, probably like me too, right? Like weird in a sense of just being, in his case, in Indiana in the 90s, hyper-achieving, scholastic overachiever, like shockingly articulate, gay, at a Catholic school that went to Harvard. And you substitute Indian American for gay and Ohio for Indiana. It's not like that different than my own background, right?
Right.
And like that was weird. And like now to just say, oh no, we're not one of the weird ones now. Like they're weird. It's just weird referring to what reference point, right? Normal relative to what reference point. Whereas like America's the country where like we are unafraid to be weird. Our founding fathers, I wasn't joking before, were weird relative to the mores of their time, because that's part of what American exceptionalism is about. So it just seems like such a particularly un-American expletive or disparaging comment to level against your opponent, as though it's like less about I'm worried about Republicans, I'm worried about like that word being deemed a bad thing. Right? America's weirdness relative to human history is part of what makes us us.
I mean, one of my heroes, Hunter Thompson, he said when the going gets weird, the weird turn pro. That was like a cool thing back in the day.
Say that again?
When the going gets weird, the weird turn pro.
I like that.
That's one of
that's kind of who we are a little bit. It's a statement of that, of American exceptionalism. Right.
Yeah, and being weird and far out is kind of it's very much in the American character. The thing that's even more unusual though is that the current incarnation of the American left they don't even like the word normal. They think it's the word itself is bad somehow. They're into transgender boxing and all these other everything you see. If it's not transgressive, it's not okay. So for them to turn around and try to make weird an insult,
particularly actually, it's particularly self-contradictory. But I also just think that even the Republican tendency, right? Because I'm a little bit, I do chafe at some of the version of this from the right. Like other people I ran for against you as president, right? Some of them made, like on the debate stage or whatever, we just want America to be normal, right? That's what they would say. And I actually don't agree with that, because I favor American exceptionalism, and I also think about normal relative to what standard. And so like my issues with some of the trans overreach or whatever relate to the negative effects it has on children, or increasing the rates of gender dysphoria. So if by premise gender dysphoria is a condition of suffering, then if you're going out of your way to create more of it, that is by definition then, or by obvious logic, a bad thing. Like and that I think is a form of argument. Not that you're weird, right? Like that alone is not, and I think that part of what's happening right now is you're actually seeing a lot of that Republican response to say, oh, you calling us weird? Well, look at all of these things that you're doing that are weird in return. It feels to me just like the wrong form of argument, rather than like an argument of the wrong kind. If national unity is like at all something we remotely care about, right? If the election gets decided, and acknowledges about 70 million people on each side of this, if the election gets decided based on one side winning, the argument of which other side was weird, and Republicans, I believe, and be biased, have at least as strong of a claim in return, it just doesn't seem like a good place to go in the character of like national discourse or the future direction of a nation, as opposed to a nation that isn't one nation anymore and might be two nations of, weird, seen as weird from the other side, but normal from within. I don't think that's what you want to see the country become.
No, probably not. I mean, is it possible? I mean, this question, I'm curious to know what you think. I've heard it theorized that the Democrats realize that the constant accusations of racism, sexism, misogyny are beginning to fall on deaf ears, that people don't like that as a campaigning tactic, so they're rolling this out as a new way of, trying to put the public relations ick on the Republican Party. It's a different kind of word shaming, less potent, right?
But more diffuse and irrefutable. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. How do you counter it? I mean, I would embrace it if I were, if I were JD Vance. I'd be like, hell yeah, I'm weird.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That to me feels like the right answer versus like, oh, you're weird. No, you're weird. Reference to what reference point? Americans, like our exceptionalism is weird in the course of human history, right? Like you got like founding fathers inventing, lightning rods and bifocal spectacles, and people who signed the Declaration of Independence. Livingston, actually, he was a guy who literally invented the steamship along with Fulton while he's an ambassador to France. That's weird, right? It's like the kind of thing we see somebody's like hyper successful in like middle school. Yeah, that's like weird. Well, those are the people who actually go on to create things that improve humanity in our lives at times, and like that's America, the place where you get to thrive.
Yeah.
Joseph Priestley came to this country because he had weird beliefs by the standards of the Anglican Church, and he was like received by Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson in Pennsylvania. He came here for the freedom to be weird, and they welcomed him because like that's America. And so to level that as a charge, as a disqualifying charge, I just think is disappointing. Actually, to me, is how I feel about it.
Yeah, we've had that streak all through our history. How many different kinds of kooky utopian thinkers came to America to try to build societies that anybody would characterize as strange.
Yeah. Elon Musk
over
fits
the
that
years.
description, right? For example, a guy you got to know.
Sure.
Really,
Yeah.
He came to this country.
Weird, actually. Yes.
He came to this country, right? I mean, like I consider myself, I'm a weird person in a lot of ways. So are you. So are most people who aspire to greatness. And like America as a nation is proudly weird against the course of human history. So no, I just think that that's probably the right answer. Is not a pejorative, right?
Yeah.
And even think about the stuff JD was talking about. The sad part about this is, in the wake of this, nobody actually will talk about anything other than the actual fertility crisis, which is we're well below replacement rate. You're going to have 2 workers for every retiree, which is considered crisis level, by 2060, which is, God willing, within our own lifetimes. Although that is a disaster for a country, and nobody has a plausible, or the first beginnings of a plausible solution to that question. And so maybe you like J.D. Vance's solutions, and maybe you don't. If you don't like them, debate the solutions. But instead, we've ignored the entire question by calling the whole thing weird. And I still think that's constructive, just in a very pragmatic sense, for a country that wants to solve some major problems that it's up against.
Yeah, it's silly though, and also the going after what's clearly kind of a joke line about childless cat
Oh my
ladies.
gosh,
I mean,
that was clearly
I
in
remember.
jest. Yeah.
I mean, Rick Wilson said about Trump that his followers were childless. it was like childless men who masturbate to anime or something like that. Like,
you gotta give people some license. You know, even when Biden, like I'll pick an example, right? Like it's easier to sort of pick on the other side. But like even when Biden said something like, "If you don't vote for me, then you ain't black." I mean, it's kind of annoying, but he was also speaking in jest, right? And so that did not become the cultural phenomenon in the same way as like childless cat ladies did. And so it sort of is a bit of an evisceration of like the possibility of humor, at least in certain contexts too, which I do think is actually a separate cultural risk that we face too.
I also think it touched the nerve because there's a little bit of discussion within like the Democratic left about this issue. Remember, James Carville brought it up.
Oh, really?
You know, about how there's too many preachy females and
so maybe touched a nerve a little too close to home, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's been a thing that people have been arguing about. So maybe that's part of it. I don't know. I just think the whole thing is
people
silly.
don't lash out. You don't. I mean, you might be annoyed, but you don't lash out unless you actually acknowledge some level of truth to the claim. Usually, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, jokes don't land unless
there's truth
to
it.
Right.
Some level of truth to it. Yeah.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious, you don't have to share with me, or maybe you haven't decided yet, but like, do you have a sense for, as a citizen taking your journalist hat off, like, do you have a sense for how you might vote among the options available this year?
Well, I can say I'm not going to vote for the Democrats. I think I'm done with them. You know, the last 8 years have just been impossible. You know, other than that, I don't know. I didn't vote last time, which was hard for me.
Yeah, you did mention that to me. I forgot. Mm-hmm. So you not because you were lazy, but you like couldn't bring yourself to.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was I wrote an article about it. It was kind of a hard situation. I think, you know, voting is important. You know, it's sort of it's a right you need to exercise it, or else you're going to lose it, right? So, yeah, I don't know. It's difficult, but I also try not to talk about it because as a journalist, you don't want.
Yeah, wearing your journalistic hat, I think that's fair. Maybe a little bit of an unfair topic for us to, I don't want to, undermine what you do, but. Did you actually vote while you were in Russia? Did you vote for like absentee mail-in?
Yes, yes. I voted from. I think I voted in both the '96 and 2000 elections from there.
Yeah.
So, but you know that's an interesting thing too, because I'm I remember how rigorous the absentee ballot process was, and I'm just now having to learn. One of the things I'm going to start working on is election security, because I know it's going to be so controversial no matter what happens in November.
Totally.
That I think every journalist needs to know all the laws
and mechanics.
And mechanics, because we don't, frankly. I mean,
one interesting place to look, just like to the extent you're taking interest in that, is actually Puerto Rico. It's a U.S. territory. They actually have single-day voting, make Election Day a holiday. They have a lot of levels of protections. Like, I think in some of this, often when you go to the sites, they make you put your finger in a die, such that if you go to another site, that you didn't vote on that same day.
Oh, that's interesting.
Places. And one of the things, so I picked this up when I traveled there earlier this year and met with a lot of leaders locally just to understand how things work. And one of the biggest takeaways is, even for people who would say, oh, this concern about election integrity is overblown, what I'll wait for is what is the best counter-argument to, in a moment where there's at least a loss of public trust, to at least taking certain basic steps that would shore up public trust. And I think that there's something to be said for a case for ritual. For actually what the ritual accomplishes. I mean, it's not like we're not asking people to, I don't know, do cartwheels and take, foot showers before they vote. We're asking them to show their ID related to the act of voting. But I think having it as a national holiday and a ritual that you go through almost creates a greater sense of civic duty and commitment. It's also something that enhances the public trust itself. Like, even if, for those who, I'm not one of them, but even for those who would argue that it doesn't improve the actual integrity of the results by that much, at a moment of doubt, why not take a unifying, non-controversial step? And then, take every increment you can. It's something so important that you might as well want it to be as accurate as you possibly could want. That, to me, I think is as much the question of the solidarity we get in moving past what otherwise is a very risky issue of public concern and trust in elections, that I'm open to the best arguments for the other side, but I haven't yet heard of them in terms of moving to single voting on election day, make it a national holiday, make government-issued ID a requirement to vote. And I think if we ever got there, I certainly would commit for my part to be as loud of a voice as I could to the Republican base and any other that we are done complaining about concerns about election integrity if we get to that place where we say we've taken the steps that one reasonably can to be confident.
Are you in favor of automatic voter registration?
I'm not, actually. I think that there's something to be said for the civic act of going through the process of, largely for practical reasons, because then you can be registered in multiple places. Puerto Rico does not have that either, so it's a good case study of Puerto Rico. I think that I am in favor of de-bureaucratizing anything that does not actually help the ultimate act of knowing whether the right person voted in the right place. I don't want an iota more of bureaucracy than is required to achieve that goal, but I want enough verification to know that the person who's actually voting is voting in one place, is alive, and is indeed the person who shows up at the ballot and is a citizen of this country. I actually come around to being in favor of English as the sole language that appears on a ballot as well. And I think there are deep discussions to be had of saying that, look, if we require, think of what we require of an immigrant, a legal immigrant, before they can cast a ballot. You could have paid millions of dollars in taxes in Silicon Valley or elsewhere. You're still not able to cast a ballot legally until you have taken an oath of loyalty to the United States of America and passed a civics test that says you know the first thing about what's going on in the United States of America. And I think that's a good thing. I don't think it's crazy to talk about whether these should be basic requirements to graduate from high school in the country to become a full citizen in the United States either. And so I think that would unite the country, actually. And I do think that the revival of civic ritual, even a day where we say this is the day where we carry out our civic duty, and then attach all of the integrity enhancing components, not as box checking exercises for just technical confidence in the results, but actually even a unifying civic ritual that brings us together. I think there's an opportunity to do both of those things at once, and I don't think it's as far out of reach as we make it out to be.
I think it would have broad appeal.
Yeah.
Too.
I think it should. It would.
It's drilled into Democrats when you're coming up and you're young and an activist that any kind of any step that might slow down someone's ability to vote is like dog whistle racism. So any kind of voter ID requirement. But really, when you think about it, it's ridiculous.
Right.
We require now very hardcore ID to get on a plane.
Drive a car.
Drive a car. You gotta have insurance to rent a car. There's all kinds of things. The requirement, it shouldn't be a big deal that you should have to prove who you are to vote. And also, I don't think it's a big deal to ask somebody to go vote.
Yeah.
Neither of those things seems like a huge ask to me. And I think
and then there's the further, we get into spicier territory, but even whatever we require of an immigrant, if you believe in that logic, should we ask more of ourselves as well? And do we think our nation will be better off for it? I think that these are at least questions worth discussing.
Sure. Yes, if they have to go through all these different hoops. Conversely, though, I think that there should be something stronger than just having to check a box that you're a citizen.
Yeah.
At least there should be some kind of post factum, process for reviewing that and making sure that the person who checks that box actually is one.
Sure.
I don't understand why that's controversial.
Yeah, I also think that even if you voted in the election of another country, you shouldn't be able to vote in the election of the United States as well, right? Dual citizenship as a concept, right? If somebody has an allegiance to a different country, that's what citizenship is. I think that there should be serious questions about their ability to cast a ballot in the United States. But you
should have to choose, shouldn't you?
Yeah, I think you should have to choose. You don't today, actually.
Yeah.
Mostly under current law, you generally don't. for people who are dual citizens, but I think you should have to choose, right? I think you should be a civic participant who selects the leadership of one country, not multiple countries. And I don't think that's too much to ask either.
I've known a lot of people who are dual citizens of, either from former Soviet countries and the United States. And, it's okay for traveling. I mean, I sort of understand the logic of that, but you can't be voting in two places.
I just don't think it makes sense to vote in two places, right? And just as I don't think it makes sense to serve in two militaries, right? It doesn't make sense. But anyway, I'm having too much fun, man. We're over time already, but let's continue this. And I like smart people like you who are untethered with respect to the ministerial partisan politicsness of it, but care a lot about ideology, and I love that. So thanks for taking the time today.
I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun discussing all this with you. So
we'll continue.
Happy to talk anytime.
Let's do more.
I'm Jeff Bezos.
What is your claim to fame?
I'm the founder of Amazon.com.
From the award-winning producers of The Facebook Dilemma,
richest guy in the world.
Frontline investigates Amazon.
Amazon's taking over the world, a good thing?
Questioning those who run the company.
What would you say to someone who feels as though humans are increasingly being treated like robots?
That's not the experience that I had in setting it up.
And those no longer there.
Most people would assume they're...
Alright guys, the world is becoming a crazy, crazy place. You guys know me, I live in the USA, I love living here, I've built multiple businesses here. I personally feel very, very blessed to live in America. I know a lot of you guys like me are not happy with the way things are being run right now. The border's going crazy, prices and inflation are through the roof. I hear this stuff from all the time when I meet you guys in person. That's why guys, I am pumped up with SendTheVote.com. SendTheVote.com is a pro-America, pro-freedom organization that's going to make sure you're registered to vote and your vote is going to count. This is not about being Republican or a Democrat. This is a nonpartisan organization. This is just going to make sure that everybody's vote is counted and nobody is left on the sidelines. You can go to the website and it's going to tell you everything you need to get registered. Send it to everybody. We need to make sure that everybody pro-America is registered to vote. If you guys are not registered to vote or you don't know how to do it, go to sendthevote.com right here. Really, really easy, really, really simple. I'm telling you guys, this is our last chance to make a difference. And you guys have a voice, believe it or not. I know you're one person, but you got to encourage everybody around you. That's why we're doing this. SendTheVote.com. Let's do this, boys. This is our last chance. Alright, boys, we have a massive, massive episode. We have the future Vice President of the United States, JD Vance, on the podcast. Before we get into it, if you guys do not know about the PrizePicks app, you gotta try it out. You guys know me, I have fired on every single app when it comes to sports, and by far, PrizePicks is my favorite. What I love about PrizePicks is instead of choosing teams, you're choosing individual players. So, each player has a set projection, and you either get to go more or less than that set projection. So, if you're really smart with sports and you know what players are going to perform on what nights, this is a no-brainer for you guys. You guys are going to tear up the PrizePicks app. Download it, give it a try. I know there's no NBA, there's no NFL right now, it's coming back soon, but don't be that stops firing on sports during the summer as well, alright? The Olympics is on, fire on some archery or something like that. We got baseball.
Oh, yo, thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Trick Nasty Host Stanky in the house. What's up? I usually have a video cam on. I'm just shirtless right now. I figured y'all didn't want to see my man boobies, so you know.
Plug in code NELP, put in $5, and you're gonna get $50. No strings attached. That's pretty much a free $50, guys. So I don't know why you wouldn't do that. Turn that 50 into God knows what if you get on a heater.
Yo, appreciate the follow. Yeah, the way to get in, bro, just follow, hang out, talk when you can, because I don't have a huge following, honestly. So I literally just give out Caliber to people who hang out and chill. I got quite a few friends if you want to look.
I like the sheet.
I mean, I got quite a few friends on here.
How crazy is this? I'm hyped for this one.
Very crazy.
I'm hyped for this one.
Very, very.
You told me and I was like, damn, I can't miss that.
Can't miss that one, right?
Can't miss it. I'm on the flight.
I mean, yeah, it's been a minute since we've done an episode. So we took in a little bit of a break, but last one was Will Smith. Last one was Will Smith. So we ended off with a bang, and then when we take a little break, you always got to come back with a bang. So
Yeah, this is fire.
JD Vance, probably the future vice president of the United States. It's pretty crazy. I don't think, and he hasn't really done much interviews. Definitely no podcasts.
Yeah, I haven't seen him on any podcast.
No
I've just seen him on like
podcasts.
interviews on like.
You haven't seen my 80 podcast. JD Vance, baby.
Crazy that
Future vice president of the world.
Full Send podcast. Full Send podcast.
Full Send podcast
I don't
with
know
Milk
who sets
Boys.
these up, but goddamn, they're doing a good job.
Shout out John Shahidi. Fresh cut.
Looks great. You look great right now.
Yo, Rat, I have action. You can just thank John for setting this up.
John, thank you for setting this up. Yeah.
Let's go. Yeah, fine. I just won $500. Let's go, baby.
Well, you can't. I don't think you can force me to do that.
No, it's all good. There's no rules.
I wasn't sure who did it. I'm not. What the fuck?
It was a collective effort.
Steiny's not that excited for this one though.
Yeah, he's like should have been just a plain white tee, like world. It looks
Steiny
like
only gets excited for like content that like he knows the chicks are gonna like.
Yeah, or he
You
could
know
ask.
what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
It's so true. Like he just thinks like, all right, clips, TikTok, girls are on TikTok.
Dude,
I'm
that's
gonna get more
so
pussy.
accurate.
That is not accurate.
Bro, it's super
That's
accurate.
So accurate, bro. You know it.
Your content is based around girls. It's fine. I'm not
Wrong with
mad.
that?
No, nothing. I'm just.
That's why if like Full Send Golf gets like 1 million views, like he's like, I don't really want to do that because like it's just all guys watching it.
Did you ever take? You taken any of those girls like for real from The Bachelor or what?
Yeah, I did. I'm going through it with one right now.
Subject.
The one that
Is it
won.
really?
Yeah, she cut me off.
I wonder why.
Why do you think?
Your commitment issues, probably.
Yeah.
I get that. Trust me. Shit.
Yeah, get that. So.
You a big watch guy now? That's what you do.
Huh?
You're a watch guy now.
Is that a new piece?
Yeah. She cut me off. I woke up, drove straight to Timepiece, and bought this. I swear to God. I
That's
sound
what
like
I
a
do.
douche, but I needed some temporary happiness.
It makes sense why your content's that way too. Related to the girl.
So what's new with you? Anything?
A lot.
No spiritual bullshit. Like just what's actually going on with you?
No spiritual bullshit. What's
Yeah.
actually going on? With me?
Yeah.
I'm right now. I'm focused on the gym in Miami, so that's my main focus.
When's that?
It's probably gonna be early next year. Yeah.
Nice.
For the first few months.
That's
It's
dope.
close to where you guys are actually living, so it's gonna be fun, man.
That's sick.
Are you gonna move out there at all?
I'll be 50-50.
Yeah, me
for
too.
taxes.
Did you ever fight Bob?
Did I fight Bob?
They got in a huge argument today.
Again?
They
Dude,
fixed
well,
it.
yeah, Full Swing, yeah.
You just always get. Is it just a thing?
No, he brought someone that, I mean, the girl, right? She's so good at golf. Well, dude, we were supposed to get Steiny to play. And that was going to be like kind of our, I don't know, like plan or whatever, but she just totally like wiped us out in the Full Swing Golf video. It'll come out soon, but I got really beaten off that.
I gotta come do that video.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah.
Bodybuilder plays golf.
I'm not good at golf.
It's a boring
Not
game.
good. It's a boring game.
I don't have the patience for it.
Do you want to do a thank you to the fans?
I did one
before the pod starts.
Yeah.
For what?
I have. Did you not see the last one I did?
No, I know. I saw it in your video.
That was a.
Yeah.
That was from the heart. I'm not gonna do it when it's not meaningful.
Wait, what? Thank you for this part.
I did a pod the day that the assassination attempt happened.
Dang it, bro.
Should I keep
You're killing them
saying
too
Peter?
quick.
Kyle, Full Send, Dana White.
What did that have to do with the assassination?
That was Dana White.
No, just like the fact that it was saying that I have a relationship somewhat with him.
Yeah, I see.
How grateful I am to be where I'm at. And not a day goes by where I forget what these guys have done for me.
Yeah.
Crazy to think. 2 years ago, I was living in my sister's shack.
Yeah. Now he's $25,000 a month, Hollywood. For
Yeah, I know. That expires soon. Then we're back to the.
That was not a good idea.
Then we're back to the two-bedroom
Why'd
in
you do
Venice.
that? Just hit.
If you see the amount of
No, it's nice.
women coming in and out of that place.
I believe it, but still, like, why not just buy?
Dude, sometimes you gotta just have.
$25,000.
Yo, if you just say you're making money and you're having fun and you're not spending it and having fun with it, it's not worth it.
I agree.
Like I'm not like.
I agree, but like $25,000 is like, why not just get?
It was only 20.
20, whatever.
Get bought.
It's like a that's like a $5 million house mortgage.
So what's 8 on?
I'm just saying. Just right? You buy that? You buy your?
No.
You gotta buy something. Why are you not buying something?
I don't. I'm
just talking about just for real estate.
I'd just rather have that cash like more liquid.
Yeah, but if if you own a property, it's like
I have
you can take money. There's
No.
so many benefits to that.
I have 85% of what I have.
You
in
don't own a
stock
home.
market.
You own a home and you bought a home in Canada, right? But you need to buy a home.
But like, what's the difference between like having my like X amount of money in a house or like treasury bonds?
I mean, you can pull directly from like the
If I
house
want to
value.
pull out, because sometimes I like need like if I want to start something.
Yeah, I get it.
Or like even like bachelor video, like
You can pull it out of the
way faster than liquidating like a house.
Not even liquidating out. I think you pull out the value from the house. You can take like a loan against the value of the house.
Yeah, but I just kind of move a little quicker. I need to move a little quicker sometimes.
I get it.
Who am I? Yo, I have it. No, I got it.
Dude, that was. I got a lot of messages about that scene. People like that.
You're acting?
They loved it. I'm
Oh,
dead
yeah,
serious. I'm dead serious. I got a ton of.
I know everyone was saying Brad was a great actor.
A ton of people messaged me about that.
You play a good agent.
I could do it.
What's up, guys? Say hello, welcome. How's it going? Hey, John. Good to see you, man.
Hello.
What's up,
Let's
guys?
go.
What's up, man? All right, call me Lee, please. Bradley, good to meet you. Yeah, good to meet you.
How are you?
Yeah, how are you?
Good. So, are you guys in Vegas, or is this just a?
Based in Miami.
You're based in Miami, so you just came up here for this?
What do you mean? Of course.
We're doing you, and then we're doing also Dana White.
Oh, nice.
Well.
Okay.
We're gonna catch up with him.
All right, that's exciting.
But dude, we're really appreciate you coming through.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Future
Thank you.
Vice President of the United States.
We got to win first, but thank you.
Got to win.
Yeah.
How does this all like feel to you?
Oh man, it's so wild. So the biggest difference from being, because I'm a senator right now, so you're still in government a little bit, but the biggest difference from where I was 2 weeks ago to today is you have a Secret Service detail, which you sort of see these guys all floating around in the background, and it just totally changes everything, right? So I went for a walk with my wife this morning, and there are all of these people just walking by like, oh, is that JD Vance? And they wouldn't have noticed me beforehand, but the reason they notice you now is because you have like 15 people following you around with guns and bulletproof vests, right? So there's no, we're done being anonymous basically at this stage in our lives, but we're having a good time with it. I mean, it's cool. We get to fly around in our nice plane and get to meet a lot of people, and we're having a good time.
How is it having the Secret Service like around all the time?
Well, it's weird because there's no, like I said, you're not anonymous anymore, right? But then there are all these like weird little ways where they're just part of your lives, and they're great people, right? I mean, I haven't met a Secret Service agent yet that I don't like, but like for example, a couple days ago, we were walking our dog. We have a really big dog, a German Shepherd, and the dog like goes to the bathroom like dogs do. And I look back at the agent who was on the detail, and I'm like, is this the sort of thing you're meant to protect me from? And her eyes got real big, like, is he really asking me to pick up dog shit right now? And of course I wasn't, right? That would be a totally ridiculous thing to do. But it's just, think about it. You always have somebody part of your life now that's following you around, and that's just a totally different vibe.
So the Secret Service, they pick up for you?
No.
That's a huge perk.
They probably would if you asked them to, but I feel like that'd be a really thing to do, to ask them to pick up after your dog. So no, I feel like if they're going to take a bullet for me, that's enough. I can handle the dog.
It's pretty cool too, because I feel like, are you the youngest vice president to ever run?
I think so, or at least maybe not in the history of the country, but I'm certainly like in our generation, recent history. I know I'm the first millennial. So
39.
Second, I'm 39 years old. I turned 40 actually in a few days, which I'm very depressed about.
When's the 40th?
August 2nd. I think it's Friday.
What's good for the 40th? Dang. Are you like...
Nothing anymore, man. I've got people following me around. I can't do anything fun. We're gonna go out to dinner with my wife and a bunch of friends, and go swimming afterwards. That's about as much excitement as we can get into now. But
kind of
it'll
sucks
be good.
that the 40th lands on the VP run.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's funny. All my buddies who are, because we're all similar age, they all have 40th birthday parties, and they're going to do stuff fun. Like, I actually had a couple friends who came out to Vegas a few months ago, and they're like, "Yeah, come out to Vegas with us." And it's just like, no, unfortunately, that phase of my life is over.
You said it's August 2nd?
August 2nd.
I don't think we're doing anything August 2nd. We love some tent.
I think I'd get in a little bit of trouble hanging out with you guys on August 2nd, so I should chill. I mean, by the way, this is like your guys' brand
This
of
is
seltzer?
our seltzer Happy Dad, yeah.
Okay, nice.
So
That's
we just
exciting.
became the number 4 seltzer nationwide.
Oh,
We just
congratulations.
passed Bud Light Seltzer.
So you guys like started this. This is your business.
Started
okay.
it from the ground up, yeah.
Okay. Can I steal a pack? Is that all right?
100%. Yeah,
We'll
we'll
give it to the crew.
load up the plane with some.
We have to be careful though, because I can only take like $75 in gifts or something. So you have to tell me
okay.
what the retail price
Okay.
is.
Wait, that's a thing?
We have to come under. Yeah, it's you can accept small gifts, but nothing big.
Huh.
Yeah, so that's the thing.
As a VP or just in politics?
I think it's being a senator, actually. I don't think it's
Senator.
running for office. I think it's being in office. But, I always like check. It's one of these things where your life changes. Where, if I go to dinner with my buddies, they love it now because I always pay. Because I'm never really sure if they're allowed to buy me dinner anymore, right? Because I don't want to have to email a campaign lawyer to go hang out with my buddies, right?
Yeah.
So I'll just pay for dinner. So of course they get the most expensive wine and the most expensive thing now. So it's great. I've got great friends.
Was being a VP like always a part of like your thought where you wanted to do in politics, or is it just something that just kind of like you knew was coming, or was it kind of random?
No, totally random, right? So I ran for so I was a business guy. I started a venture capital firm and had been doing that for a while. And the home state senator where we live in Cincinnati, he dropped out, became, or I guess retired, I should say, and that was in 2021. Decided to run for his seat, and that was the first time I'd ever been involved in politics. So I get elected at the end of 22, and sort of have been a senator for the past 18 months or so. And then a few months ago, people started saying, I think Donald Trump may choose you as VP, and I'm like, no way, there's no way it's going to happen. And then like a couple months later, they start doing vetting, which is a totally bizarre experience. By the way, we could talk the whole time about vetting. So like, for example, lawyer comes to your house, asks you the most intrusive questions imaginable, right? And my wife's sitting there. We have 3 kids upstairs asleep. And at one point, the lawyer.
Hey, what up, Guts?
I'm gonna ask him
hey, what's happening, man? Afternoon. It's like midnight.
And he goes, "Do
Where
you
are
have
you
any
from?
secret family?" And I'm like, "Are you serious? Do I have any secret family? Like, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, sometimes people will have like, another spouse, and they'll have like other kids in a place like Alaska." I'm like, "Dude, I've never even been to Alaska. Of course, I don't have a secret
You're
family."
getting grilled by the lawyer and your wife at the same time.
Exactly. Oh, by the way, if I did, I'm not going to admit it in front of my wife right now. Like, it's one of those questions where if you've gotten to that point in your life and you're such a dishonest person that you have a secret family in Alaska, I think that most people would just, I assume, hide it at that point.
Yeah.
But no, I don't have a secret family in Alaska, and it's all these just weird questions they ask.
Wow.
Because they want to make sure that they're prepared for the news media firestorm. So it's a pretty wild experience.
How did Mr. Trump ask you to become VP?
So for a couple months, you sort of knew that you were on the short list, right? So they were, asking about everything you'd ever said and asking about everybody you know, and do you have any family members that might say something negative? They're just doing kind of a basic, they call it vetting, and they're trying to find out everything. So I knew I was at least on the short list for a little while, but the Monday morning of the Republican National Convention, that's the first day of it, we fly to Milwaukee we have 3 little kids, 7, 4, and 2. So we fly to Milwaukee, and I have no idea what's going on. And the plane doesn't have Wi-Fi on it. So it's about an hour flight, and I land, and I've got like 350 messages, right? And one of them is from somebody on the Trump campaign that says, hey, check your phone. Make sure you don't miss a call because a really important call's coming. So I'm like, oh shit, right? Either a good call or a bad call, but it's an important call. And about an hour later, I get another message from the same person who says, hey, you just missed a really important call. So I'm like, oh no. So I call Trump, and I'm like, hey, sir, what's going on? He's like, JD, you missed a very important phone call, and now I'm going to have to pick somebody else. And I like tense up and almost have a heart attack. And the crazy thing about it is my son is in the hotel room with me. And he's really into Pokemon cards right now. He's going through a Pokemon phase. Are you guys into Pokemon?
I am. Back in the day,
Yeah, that's a big phase right now, I think, in general.
Yeah. So, he's really into it. So, he's trying to talk to me about Pikachu. And I'm on the phone with Donald Trump. And I'm like, son, shut the hell up for 30 seconds about Pikachu. This is the most important phone call of my life. Please just let me take this phone call. And he doesn't care. He's like, he doesn't know what the President of the United States means. So, Trump hears him and says, who is that? I'm like, that's my 7-year-old son. He's like, put him on speakerphone. And so I do, and Trump proceeds to read the statement that he's about to put out, making me his VP nominee. And he asked my son, he's like, what do you think about that? And my son's like, oh, it sounds pretty good, And he goes, okay, fine. And he hangs up the phone, and the statement goes out 5 minutes later, and then my whole life changed. And that's how it happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what was the initial reaction that you felt just from the people of being the nomination?
First of all, people are super supportive and excited, right? So, you're at the RNC convention, there's, 10,000, 15,000 people there, and the biggest news of the week is who's the VP going to be. So as soon as it gets announced, there's just this rush of positive attention and people hugging you, everybody you see is backslapping you, and That's very positive, very fun. My wife, who doesn't like love the spotlight, she's not sort of one of these people who loves politics. She doesn't seek it out. She even was kind of getting into it because people were just so nice and friendly and saying all kinds of good things. And then for a few days I sort of joked that I got like a 24-hour honeymoon because everything goes really well, and then of course the media starts attacking you, which is what you sign up for and you expect it. But it's been, 95% positive. It's just been a very cool experience.
Yeah.
And just like you take since he asked me to be his nominee, right? So I've been in Milwaukee, I've been to Vegas, we're going to Reno today, I've been to California, I've been to Michigan, I've been to Wisconsin, I've been to Pennsylvania. I've seen more in the country the past 2 weeks.
I just wanted to ask, when did your opinion change on Trump? Because you weren't a Trump supporter back then, and what led to that?
Yeah. So it's funny because for a long time until Biden had this big debate gaffe that blew up his whole campaign, there was this thing where the media would say, well, Biden has bad memory, but so does Donald Trump. And I'm always like, what the hell are you talking about? Donald Trump remembers in excruciating detail everything I said about him 9 years ago, right? The guy has a memory like I wish that his memory was like Joe Biden. But I was critical of Trump in 2015, 2016, and I think like there are a lot of different things you could say about it, but fundamentally it boils down to two things. Number one, I didn't think he was going to be a great president. I, in fact, thought he was a really good president, like certainly the best president of my lifetime. And so when the facts change, I think thinking people should change their mind, right? Okay, I was wrong about the guy, and he was great, but there's something a little bit deeper where I kind of learned that the media is so dishonest about Trump that a lot of the things that I thought about him in 2016 weren't just like, you got to change your mind. It's just outright that was false. So, for example, I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was this thing that happened in Charlottesville where white supremacists killed this girl, and very tragic situation. And the media said, well, Trump stood up for the white supremacists. And there was a time in my life where I would have believed the media, what they said about it, and then you go and read the transcript of what he actually said. It's like, wait a second, he actually condemned the white supremacists. He never said that there were very good people on both sides. What he said is that some of the protesters were good people, not like the white supremacists who murdered this girl. And you realize so much of what the media says about this guy is totally dishonest. I think once you accept that frame of mind, you start to think for yourself a little bit. And when I started doing that, I started realizing, one, he's a good president, but two, he's just not the guy. He's not the scary person the media makes him out to be.
Yeah, this is like the most sort of concerning thing, I think, as just a person in general, specifically in the United States, is like, where do you actually trust and what do you actually trust? Because there's so much backing from big companies, big tech, where it's like they're invested in one side winning versus the other side losing. And it just becomes this really weird space where you're like, what is actually real? And you yourself even admit to seeing something some way and just taking it for what it was and seeing it change. My question for you is like, as this all progresses, and for example, currently you try to Google the attempt assassination on Donald Trump and it doesn't even come up.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's one of the most concerning things.
It's crazy.
It's like
you type in assassination of TRU and it doesn't autocomplete Trump.
Yeah.
It happened 2 weeks ago.
And then you look at the biggest donors for like the other side. We're talking about as far as like the Biden-Harris campaign, and it's like Google is one of their biggest donors.
Yep.
So that's public.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's all real.
Google is the biggest donor to the Democrat
Oh, and
Party.
their employers are huge donors of the Democrats. I mean, I know friends who work there. I know friends who are involved in the tech sector. Google is a straight up insane company. The people, the senior leadership, the people who run the search algorithms, it is effectively a left-wing propaganda machine. And there are all these other ways you come up to. Sorry to interrupt you, but
no, you're great.
Like this was a thing that I like a couple of years ago when I was doing my Senate campaign. Somebody said, type in, go and Google, can a man get pregnant? And I was like, well, why would I do that? You know, I know the answer to that question. He's like, just go do it. You type in Google, I don't know if this is still true, but it was true 2 years ago. Can a man get pregnant? And the first search result is yes, a man can get pregnant. In fact, it happens more often than people think.
What?
Right. It's a weird company, but it actually, you realize it controls the flow of information in our country.
But that's what's scary, because like most people are not going to do like any sort of research or looking in deeper, and they just take it for face value. So it's just kind of like, where do we go from here as technology advances and as like that sort of side of things just becomes more and more powerful? Like, how do we actually know what's real?
Well, that's a good question, man. I think part of it is you have to accept if you're a consumer of information, that everybody's trying to sell you something. And you can't just assume because you go and Google something it's true. You can't assume because you go and watch something at YouTube or go and watch something, I mean, even a Rumble. No, you have to sort of think for yourself. You have to assume that somebody's trying to filter their own bias and put it into something that you're consuming. And that's kind of the attitude that I take towards news. And you just have to, as much as possible, think for yourself. I actually think it's better now than it was 5 years ago. Because yeah, Google's still crazy, but now people are watching podcasts like yours. I mean, millions of people watch your podcast, right? So, just this movement of people thinking for themselves, I think, is a much bigger deal, and has changed the way we consume information. And we just have to keep on going down that pathway, being skeptical, thinking for yourself, consuming alternative sources of information, and that's probably how you break the fever. But it is a problem, right? Yeah. And we can give you another example of Google, right? So. What do you think is the biggest email client in the world? It's probably Gmail. In fact, I'm almost certain it's Gmail. Yeah. But I use Gmail, so I'm not criticizing. But one of the main ways we fundraise for political campaigns in our country, I don't know how they do it in Canada, but you send text messages, right? Or you send emails. Well, let's say that Google filtered 90% of the Republican fundraising emails into spam, but only filtered 10% of Democrat fundraising emails into spam. Well, the Democrats are going to raise way more money. That's not hypothetical. That is exactly what happened. In fact, we've tried to file a lawsuit against Google to try to get that changed. But there are all of these weird, subtle ways where Google and companies like it try to control the flow of information. And I think the long-term solution, just one more thing on this, is we have to have a culture of technology innovation where new companies can take on the big guys. Because in Silicon Valley, the big tech companies, they're all crazy. They're all dominated by the same. Whereas the little tech companies, the upstarts, right, the Bitcoin guys and the AI guys, a lot of them are a lot more rational and a lot more independent. Maybe they're libertarian, maybe they're liberal, but they at least think for themselves. We got to empower them to try to take on the big incumbents, and that's one of the things these guys try to prevent.
All right, guys, I'm going to interrupt the pod really, really quick. I want to let you guys know about my favorite healthy snack, board jerky. All right, you guys know, you've seen me. I'm trying to be a little more healthy these days. I was getting too many comments. You guys telling me I look pregnant and shit. I was staying up all night crying. So now I'm into healthy snacks, and board jerky is one of my favorites. This jerky, if you guys try it, I don't even have to say it. Try it for yourself. The quality of the jerky is absolutely unbelievable. And I'm a big jerky guy, and this jerky is by far the best. I'm traveling a lot all the time, so I always have board jerky on me when I get hungry. There's 4 different flavors. My favorite's the original. The macros are unbelievable. There's lots of so it's just a great healthy snack. Keep the barrel in check. But yeah, trust me, if you guys like jerky, try this out. And when you try it, you'll thank me. It's available on Amazon.com. The reviews are going through the roof. Everybody loves it. So go to Amazon.com right now. Give board jerky out a try. Keep it in your gym bags. Keep it in your backpacks. This is my favorite healthy snack. It's on me all the time. Amazon.com, board jerky. Get back on the pod.
Yeah. Is it going to be harder this time around for like Google and those companies to pull the stuff that they did last election cycle?
It's a good question. I don't know. I think it probably is harder because people are just much more skeptical of accepting the narrative. I see this a lot in college campuses. In 2016 and 2020, there was a real fear of people. They didn't want to be ostracized. They didn't want to say what was actually on their mind. They were a little bit terrified of the social pressure. I just think people give much less shit about it than they did 4 years ago, and certainly than 8 years ago. And I do think that is empowering, right? Courage is contagious, and the more that people, again, trust their own instincts and consume their own information, I think that it empowers the truth to come out a little bit more. But I won't present the bias isn't there, but I think it's probably less powerful than it was a few years ago.
I think people have just seen, too, over the past 4 years what a shit show it's been.
Exactly.
And how bad Biden's been. I know, Brad, you tweeted about it, too, right? How everyone's kind of coming out of the woodwork now and supporting Trump.
Yeah.
Like, I remember when we had him on our podcast near the last election.
I watched that. It was a good episode.
We got a lot of shit. and now it's just completely different where everyone in our like community and space is like now supporting Trump, and like it's just crazy to see how much everyone's kind of flipped, which is a good thing.
Yeah, it is a good thing. And I think especially if you guys are probably in your 20s, early 30s.
I just turned 30.
Wait, hold on. Brad, are you older?
I'm 35, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that a shot at me. I don't
No,
know.
I
You got the VP right here. You trying to take shots?
No,
at
I
me.
wasn't taking straight. My
No,
bad.
come on, man.
My
Get
bad.
it together.
My bad.
Steiny's 32.
This is the guy who buys you beer when you guys go
Yeah.
out for-
He's been that guy for a
How
while.
old are you? Tell me how old you are.
Around 30.
Shut up, man.
But so what I think is definitely true for like young Americans especially, and I'm 39, so people call 39-year-olds geriatric millennials because we're millennials, but we're sort of on the older side of the millennial generation. I do think, like, look, if you want to buy a home, it's got a hell of a lot harder to do that under the Kamala Harris, Joe Biden administration, right? If you want to sort of, it's gotten a lot more expensive. If you just want to live in a safe community, that's gotten harder because there's more drugs coming across. People, believe their own eyes more than they believe the narrative the media sells. And I don't know how Kamala Harris can look at the country and say, look, things are way better than they were 4 years ago. She just can't do that.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Were you surprised by the way things played out with that, or did you guys see it coming?
A little bit. But it's funny. The president, meaning President Trump, was way less surprised about it than I was, and I think his campaign was way less surprised about it. I mean, because again, I knew I was being vetted, and I remember talking to somebody on his campaign in early June, and this was even before the debate debacle, and she was like, "Look, we think there's a really good chance that if you get picked, you're not going to be debating Kamala Harris. You're going to be debating whoever Kamala Harris chooses, because we don't think Joe Biden can survive." He's just so bad. He's just so bad that they didn't think he would make it to November, and they were right, of course. So, I mean, I was just, it's kind of shocking when it happens, even when you expect it to happen. So I guess I expected it to happen, but I was still surprised when he actually pulled the trigger. He's the President of the United States. Think about this. And he just sent a letter out one day and said, "I'm not running for president anymore." That's never happened in the lifetime of any person in this room.
Is
Yeah, also,
that even, is that even legal? Like the way that, because I'm reading a bunch of I'm reading a bunch of stuff, and it's like, didn't they just bypass? They're supposed to be the Party for Democracy.
Yes,
and
this
they
is
kind of
important.
just
This is a very important
bypass.
point.
Yeah,
I
They
agree.
bypass like the total
No.
democratic process.
Well, because they sit on a side and they say, Donald Trump is against democracy.
Yeah.
But they're also now they held someone long enough to pass up where they could actually vote for a new kind of like nominee, and then they just picked who they wanted. So there's actually no democracy in that.
Not at all. And 14 million people, look, it's not my party, and I wouldn't have voted for him, but 14 million people voted for him to be the nominee of the Democrat Party.
Yes.
How many people have voted for Kamala Harris to be the nominee of the Democrat Party?
None.
Zero. Not a single person. So it's funny, they accuse me of Donald Trump of being threats to democracy. Like, Trump is the most popular person in the party. He still ran through the primary process because that's what you have to do, right? You have to persuade voters that you're the guy. That's how it works. And basically what happened is Barack Obama, the Clinton family, and a few billionaires got in a room together and said, "Hey, this guy's political dead weight. Let's throw him overboard." And that's really creepy if you think about it. But then you realize he's the president of the United States, and it kind of makes you question what is the real power center in this country.
Yeah,
if
unelected
a few
officials.
billionaires and a few unelected officials could throw the president overboard. I think, I've tried to make this argument to Democrats, is look, if you are uncomfortable by how this process shaked out and you feel kind of insulted as a voter, vote for Republicans. You may not agree with us on everything, but at least in our party we believe you should have to persuade people, not try to run this corrupt process in the background.
It's weird how it's always it's weird. I don't know. It's like these are the bad people, but they're doing the bad things.
That's right.
And it's interesting.
You know what I've noticed?
It is interesting.
For the younger people too, for like the younger voters, what I've noticed is how big social media's played.
Yeah.
You said you're a millennial.
Yeah.
So have you noticed? And has that been better for you? Playing in the social media, because what I noticed too is whenever you go on TikTok, you scroll 3 times, you see Joe Biden falling off his bike. You only see negative things, right?
Yeah.
So anything you say now can get flipped up.
That's right.
So has that played a role for you?
Yeah, it has. I mean, I think just instinctively I understand social media a little bit better because I'm sort of the generation of social media. Facebook became a really big thing. I was in the Marines, but towards the end of my Marine Corps career, and then as I got into college, and so I think we use it more. Like I don't. Most politicians, they have a staff member who sort of runs their Twitter. I don't do that. Like I just put up whatever. I guess it's X now. But I just put whatever I want to on X, and sometimes I get in trouble for it. But I just think it's much more important to be unfiltered and to be like a real human being. You're going to make mistakes sometimes, but real humans make mistakes. But I do think our engagement is a lot higher because of it. And this was one thing that came out of the because I'm not a big TikTok guy. We're starting to try to use TikTok, but not my my account, but there was a ton of TikTok activity that was positive in the Milwaukee convention because I took my kids for a walk in downtown Milwaukee, right? And you guys know this movie Forgetting Sarah Marshall? With
Yeah.
Russell Brand? It's like
I watched it on the plane the other day.
It's one of my favorite movies of all time. So I'm walking downtown Milwaukee.
It's a great movie.
Sorry.
It's
I think he's lying about
What, are
watching
you an
it today.
anti-Forgetting Sarah
No,
Marshall guy?
I love it, but I think he's making that up that he watched it today. That's all. I'm sorry.
I recently just went through a breakup.
Okay.
So.
He watched it with his ex, yeah.
Oh, sorry, man.
Yeah, it's okay.
Started to bring up bad
Hopefully
stuff.
this interview will help me get her back.
I hope you're doing okay. Let me know if I can help. So Russell Brand is the rock star in Forgetting Sarah Marshall. I'm walking downtown Milwaukee with my 3 little kids, and Russell Brand comes in the other direction. It's like one of the few times I've ever been starstruck in my whole life. My favorite line of that movie is "Take my eyes, not the shirt." You know what I'm talking
Yeah, Jonah Hill.
Yeah, exactly. So that interaction got a ton of content on TikTok, and so we try to use it, and even when we don't try to use it, I think we benefit from it because I'm not falling off my bike or falling down the stairs.
And I think it makes like the younger audience way more relatable with you, Trump, than like the Democratic Party.
I think so, and the thing that Republicans we really do have going for us is because we're so sick of being filtered and we're so sick of being told what we're allowed to say and what we're allowed to think is Republicans are just much more comfortable with humor, right?
Yeah.
Trump is, all these great leadership qualities. I love the guy, but he's also just funny as shit.
For sure.
Right?
One of the funniest guys ever.
Oh, absolutely, right? You spend time with Trump, you're like, oh my God, this dude is off the charts funny.
He's so funny.
And I'll tell you a story. So again, my wife doesn't love the spotlight. We're doing this fundraiser for Trump in my hometown in Cincinnati, and raising a lot of money, and then you use photos. The way these fundraisers always work is you do a line of photos, and we finally, like, my wife and I are the last people in line, and he gives Usha a big hug. He's like, Usha, you look so beautiful. I'm so glad to see you. And then he's like, what do you think about politics? And she gives this super diplomatic answer. She's like, well, sir, JD really believes in it, and he really believes in public service, and I'm glad to be supportive of him. And he looks at her and says, yeah, my wife hates it too. And it's just, he's got a natural humor to him that I do think makes him much more relatable.
100%.
Yeah. Like, is Kamala Harris funny? No, right?
No.
She's just not. But
her laugh sucks too.
Yeah, well, more than that, it makes me, it's like it makes you feel kind of creeped out a little bit, right? Like, why is she laughing at the things that she laughs at? But yeah, Trump is just he's got a good sense of humor, and that helps him, I think, politically.
What's the worst things about Kamala Harris? It just reminded me when you said laughing, like she was laughing about not going to the in all those interviews, which is just weird. But what do you think's like, to our audience, like what are the main scary things about Kamala Harris becoming president?
One is, okay, I don't actually think Kamala Harris, like, if you want to do this job, you should care about public policy, right? Like, policy makes people's lives better. And I've never seen an interview with Kamala Harris where I'm like, oh, she really cares about this thing, and she really wants to do this thing to make people's lives better. Like, I just don't think, I think she just doesn't actually care that much about the details, and that's not the kind of president you want. My biggest issue, because I think it's transformative in a bad way for the country, is like, you can't let 25 million people in your country illegally with no control. The drug cartels have taken over. We've got record amounts of people dying of fentanyl. The drug cartels are bringing in. Like, all these problems with the border, she is the border czar, and she hasn't done anything about it, right? So if your job is to secure the southern border and you've been in power for 3.5 years and you didn't do shit, you don't get a promotion, you should get fired, right? And I think that's a big, big part of what's wrong with her entire campaign is she's sort of trying to run away from the Biden record because she knows it's not popular, but you were the vice president. Clearly this guy's like practically brain dead. Clearly you were the person driving the ship here, and you were his vice president, and you own a lot of these failures. But I mean, there are little things. We could talk for so long about some of these issues, but I'm a big believer that we have to, like, build more stuff in America. Like, I come from a manufacturing town. We got to make more stuff. If you want to make more stuff, you have to have low-cost energy. Well, she wants to destroy the American energy economy in the name of green energy, which is just going to shift manufacturing to China, which is the dirtiest economy in the world. So if you actually care about clean air and clean water, which I do, you don't want to ship manufacturing to China. You want to bring it home. But her policies have the exact opposite outcome. So just a whole host of things she's wrong on the policy. There's something the media doesn't pick up on that I think should become a bigger issue is staff turnover goes to whether you can get good people to work in your government, right? The presidency is too big for any one person. You make the big decisions, but you need people to work for you. She has 92% staff turnover.
Wow.
How can you staff a government if 92% of the people who work for you don't want to work for you? That's a bad thing.
Meaning people are like quitting the
Quitting,
administration?
yes.
Is there any
During the last 4 years?
People who work for her, correct?
Yeah,
92%
just over her
turnover, yeah.
career.
Has there been any like rationale or why that's happened?
You know, I've heard different stories, and I don't put much stock in what I read in the media. I mean, what I've heard is that she's just like yells at people a lot. She's mean. She's kind of insecure, and you combine insecure with mean. Like you can do one of those two things maybe, and be a decent boss, but you can't do both of them. But I don't know. I just know that the data is the data, and she has really bad staff turnover. But we need good people. Like I'm a Republican. I don't want her to win, but if she wins, you need good people to actually work in the government. And I think it's going to be a problem if she wins.
Going back to X, wanted to ask, what's your relationship with Elon Musk?
Yeah, so, you know, I knew it back in my tech days. I knew Peter Thiel is a very good friend of mine. And Peter and Elon sort of got their start in Silicon Valley together. And so I kind of knew Elon a little bit through Peter. And then, you know, Elon, not all that different from me, has had a bit of a political awakening over the last few years. I think like a lot of us is just looking around and saying, this is too crazy, what happened to common sense? And I think that's why he bought X. Like, I actually think it was, you know, who knows if he'll ever make any money over it, but he wanted to buy X to ensure that there was actually a place for free speech on the internet. And he believed that was important because he recognized that people's opinions were being censored by the Googles and the Facebooks of the world. So, you know, I don't know him super well, but you know, we hang out, we text every now and then, and you know, we sort of bounce ideas. He's a very funny guy. I don't think the people, the media realizes this, but something about Elon that I care about, I don't know if anybody else cares about it, but one of my big things is I think way too much of the modern economy is kind of fake. Like if you look at Google, like what is Google's actual business? Google sells digital advertisements based on the search results, right?
Yeah.
What is Facebook's business model? To sell digital advertisements based on how people use Facebook. Elon is building rockets that go to the moon and Mars, right? He's building a real business. And I love that you have an entrepreneur like that who's kind of in the old American model of like Howard Hughes of, I'm going to build really cool shit that goes to space. And I think it's really inspiring to people that he's not just like trying to sell targeted ads to a smaller and smaller slice of the country. He's trying to build big things. You know, he's building, whether it's solar panels or electric cars or rockets, or he's trying to connect the entire world through satellite internet. He's just doing a lot of cool stuff, and it's harder to do that stuff because you got to deal with regulators in Washington, and you know, people come after you. But I think it's much more productive, and it's a lot cooler.
I have a question about just obviously, you know, running and being in politics. Do you take what sometimes the media says about you personally? Like, I don't know if you saw that. There was like a whole clip of people calling you weird. Did you see that? It was like a clip of like.
I certainly know the Kamala campaign wants to call me weird.
But I'm wondering why that word, and because like it was on like it was like clipped on like 1,000 different media outlets. Like they were all using the same word.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's like something they focus grouped and decided to push on us. I mean, like I'm a pretty normal guy. I've got a wife and kids, and I like to hang out and you know watch football, and I care about this stuff because I care about the country.
Yeah.
My attitude on this is, my best guess, this is just a total guess, is that her campaign is run by a lot of like 24-year-old social media interns who maybe were bullied in school, and so now they've decided they're going to do that the same thing. They're going to take that like, attitude of the middle school social scene and try to run a campaign on it. I just don't think most Americans buy it or care.
Yeah.
But they're certainly pushing it. I'm certainly aware of it. But my attitude is like, I'm just going to be who I am, and if they want to attack me for whatever they're going to attack me on, that's fine. You just got to kind of power through it and do your thing.
Yeah.
She's been attacked for a lot too.
Yeah, I mean it's funny. It's like the people who call me weird want to give like hormone therapies and sterilize 9-year-olds. Like I think it's a lot weirder than
man.
you know me just like living a normal life with my kids and my wife. But this is what they do. I think is they latch onto a message and they try to sell it even if it's fake. And I think you know again to go back to something Trump said. We were talking about Trump earlier, is Trump's superpower in politics is he just doesn't give a shit, right? He doesn't care what they say about him. He's going to be himself. He's going to tell jokes. He's going to say things that drive some people off a wall, but then when you actually listen to what he said, he's like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that you just, if you're going to be in politics in the social media age, you've got to kind of have a thick skin and just do what you need to do.
And they'll dig up anything from your history.
I've learned that the hard way the last few days, man.
Let's see how much sugar is in the leading hard iced teas. The competition has 20 grams of sugar per can, and there's 12 cans in a case, which comes to 240 grams. Let's measure that. So that's 69 sugar cubes per case. Instead, Happy Dad hard iced tea has 1 gram of sugar per can, or only 12 grams of sugar for the entire case. That's only 3 sugar cubes. Drink Happy Dad hard iced tea, and don't feel guilty about it.
Well, I have a question about before this question.
Sure.
We were talking about like the sterilizing of kids and all this stuff. Like, what do you think the actual purpose of that shit is?
I don't know, man.
Like, what would the...
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I had a friend from law school. I got into a big argument about this with a few years ago, and we're basically not friends anymore, which is sad because I love this person. But I think part of it is these people think that everything that's different about men and women is, they use this word, socially constructed, right? It all comes from culture. And it's like, we all know this, right? Men and women, yes, some of our differences are cultural. Some of our differences are just their basic biology, right? Yeah. And I think they're so uncomfortable with that, they try to biologically change men into women and women into men, because if you can get rid of the biological differences, then you can kind of get rid of all the other differences too. And I think you guys know Tucker Carlson, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Tucker and I have talked a lot about this, but men and women being different to me is not like a bad thing. It's a source of one of the coolest parts about being like a living, breathing human being in the world, right? Is women think about stuff slightly differently than men do, and that is a good thing. And we shouldn't try to like destroy those differences in the name of equality. We should give women and men equal opportunity and equal chances. Yeah. But sometimes people are going to make different choices, right? And that's okay. And because men and women make different choices, that's like not an excuse to sterilize kids to try to turn a girl into a boy, or vice versa. But that's what they're doing. And the tell on this stuff, like, I really didn't care about this stuff until a few years ago. I think maybe being a father changes your mind a little bit on this stuff. But the tell for me was when they started saying, well, this stuff is totally reversible. If you give hormonal therapies to a 9-year-old kid, that is not totally reversible. I mean, these kids have like bladder problems and other stuff that's just gross. And why are we doing this to our kids without any real confidence in the science? It makes you realize, frankly, a lot of the public health establishment in this country is pretty deranged.
And it's also a whole nother, like, I don't think people even recognize this. It's a whole nother, like, a revenue source for the pharmaceutical industry, where it's like, they're making it like, I forget what the word is when you can get your insurance to pay for something, where it's like, if it's a life, you need it, they're making it like...
It becomes reimbursable.
Exactly.
Yes.
So it's like, people don't even recognize...
Dark.
Where now it's...
Yes, that's the exact right word for it. It's dark. I mean, dude, like, one of the things I actually agree with, at least the old school left on, is you got to be careful about when big corporations use financial incentives to control the government, right? Yeah. Like, you don't want people getting rich because they passed a law. I know. You want people getting rich because they make products that people need, right? So this is always a criticism that the old left made about American healthcare is you don't want to force doctors to give people something just because it's going to make some pharmaceutical company rich, right? That doesn't make any sense. And yet, we right now are giving kids hormonal therapies. Pharmaceutical companies are making billions of dollars off of this shit. Yeah. And none of us are looking around and saying, well, wait a second. Is this good because they're making money off of it? Or is it good because it's actually in the best interest of these kids? And that is something, again, the Democratic Party of 30 years ago would have went wild over this because it's money intersecting with medicine in a way that's really bad for human beings. And now the only people talking about it are Republicans.
You know, it's weird. I saw the Gavin Newsom pass that bill recently about how if a kid wants to become trans at school, they don't have to tell the parents.
Which is sick.
Which blew my mind to even hear something like that.
Yeah, which is sick because, like, all of us have been teenagers before. All teenagers go through awkward phases where they don't exactly know what their place is. Or they, people go through emo phases, or they dye their hair black. Like, every kid goes through some developmental phase where they're confused. And what this weird movement is doing is encouraging people to like latch onto their insecurities, not tell their parents about them, right?
Yeah.
And then I haven't confirmed this, so check my facts here. But I've also heard that in California, like if you're a parent and you think maybe it's a little crazy to give your 12-year-old hormonal therapies, you can be at risk of having your kids taken away. Like I'm a father of 3. That would make me go absolutely like, we're moving to the hills. Keep your hands off my kids. This is crazy town.
But also another level to that is, in that bill that he's talking about passing, it's like, you know, it's the gender-affirming care. They don't have to tell the parents. So the kids are just talking to some random adult about how they feel a certain way. And like that's even beyond what you're saying, even more concerning, because it's like that human being could have completely different biases. And so they're gonna input them on whoever's the kid is telling them like how I feel.
And not just biases. I don't trust some stranger to talk to my kid about their sex and their gender.
Period.
Right?
Like I don't.
Period.
Whether
right?
it's that or just the normal shit. It's like, why are you just not talking to kids about math and
yes, exactly,
school shit?
Yeah. And by the way, we're falling behind in math and reading. So we you know, our leaders are trying to convince our teachers to talk to kids about gender reassignment when they're 12 years old. Meanwhile, we don't do math as good as we used to. We don't do reading as good as we used to. Maybe we should focus on the shit that schools are actually supposed to teach kids. Again, it's it's common sense, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, that's their view, is that we should be teaching kids gender reassignment, and they think that we're weird. Doesn't make a lot of sense.
Did you see all the Olympic stuff?
That was bizarre.
Oh man, a ceremony should.
That was so weird.
It's just like a slap in the face to Christians and anybody who has, I would say, aesthetic sense, right? It wasn't just weird.
I think
it was
all
ugly.
religions.
It was ugly. Like I watched this thing, and you know, like you want the Olympic opening ceremony to be beautiful, right? You want it to like elevate the human spirit, and it's just this creepy thing where people are dressed up as these little nymphs doing the last. I was grossed out by it.
Some guys like, what's the purpose though? Is it just like, do you think they do it to cause, like, we know this is probably going to get like more attention?
Yes, I think they do it to cause shock, and that's why I try to just ignore this stuff. Like I saw the Olympics opening ceremony for a couple minutes. I turned it off. I tried not to think about it anymore. But yeah, this is the thing that, you know, I feel like art, the idea of art in its best form, right? And I'm not like an art guy. First time I ever went to an art museum, I think, was when my wife made me go. But at its best, right, it's uplifting the human spirit, it's showing you beautiful things, it's making you think of what's possible. Whatever this is, it's not that, right? It's just shocking people to try to draw attention, which maybe works for social media clips, but I think it makes our whole society a lot darker.
I know you're against like a lot of wars and stuff.
Yeah.
What was it like when you were serving in Iraq?
Yeah, I mean, so I went into the Marine Corps in 2003, and so my grandma had 6 grandkids, and 3 of us enlisted in the United States Marines. So it became kind of a family tradition thing. And I wasn't an infantryman, so I you know, like the grunts, as we called them, had much more like direct access to danger than we did. And what, you know, in Iraq, what was so weird about it, like the 2 things that really stuck out is, because sometimes you're just like hanging out and mortar or rocket fire starts raining down, and you've got a shelter in place, and you're like, what the hell are we actually doing here? You know, shouldn't we go out and get the guys who are shooting rockets at us rather than just sort of, you know, go hide in a bunker every time they fire? That was one thing. The second thing that was really weird is they had me do security for the Iraqi poll workers, because you guys are probably too young to remember this, but 2005 was the big Iraqi parliamentary elections. And you remember like where people stuck their fingers in the ink and then raised their purple finger to show that they had voted. We were doing security for those poll workers. And what was so weird about it is a lot of American leaders had convinced themselves that we were there for democracy. We were there to bring democracy to Iraq. And even the poll workers didn't give a shit about democracy, right? They just wanted to live in a safe place. Like they were pissed at America, but they weren't pissed at America because we were, you know, more socially progressive than they were. You know, we gave rights to gay people. Like, that's not why they were pissed at America. They were pissed at America because we were the strongest country in the world, and we couldn't keep car bombs from blowing up in their markets. And they were just pissed off about it. And I kind of realized, like, all this high-minded bullshit you hear from American leaders about spreading democracy to the world, if we actually want to help the world, we should make it safer and have there be less killing. That is the best influence America can have in the world. And by the way, that is a huge difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Like, Kamala Harris wants to send State Department dollars to people to do, like, trans pride parades overseas. right? It's like my attitude is if you want to do a trans pride parade, that's your business, but why do American tax dollars have to fund this stuff? Donald Trump's attitude is, I want to use American power to try to bring peace to the world. That sounds a hell of a lot smarter to me.
Yeah, the foreign policy stuff, like, I just feel like Trump does such a good job with that, with like
Really
dealing
good.
with all the world leaders. And
Yeah.
right when Biden came into office, obviously the Ukraine-Russia stuff started.
Yeah.
Iran's getting out of control.
Right. The Israel stuff started, right? They attacked, killed, over 1,000 people. It's like every hotspot in the world became a war zone, and Donald Trump had it under control. This is, by the way, I think one thing that the liberals, like, they're just wrong about it. This is not a statement of opinion, this is a statement of fact. I've sat in classified briefings, and I'm not going to give anything away. I'm not going to give state secrets away here. I want the police to knock down the door. But world leaders were terrified of Donald Trump, right? And there's something to be said for actually having a little bit of fear in people, right? It created deterrence.
Of course.
They were terrified that if they did something crazy, Trump would whack the shit out of them, and that kept a lot of bad people in line. That is a fact. And when liberals say that Donald Trump's foreign policy was erratic, well, if his foreign policy was erratic, why did we have so much fewer war all over the world? It doesn't make an ounce of sense.
Yeah, I was at the RNC too, and one thing that was really tough to watch was when they brought all the Gold Star families on stage, and I obviously knew what a shit show the Afghanistan pullout was, but just hearing it from those families was like really heartbreaking to hear all that stuff.
It's so heartbreaking, and these are really like the best of us. When I started the Marine Corps, I heard a colonel give a eulogy for a Marine of his who was killed, and he put it in this way that I thought was, because he's like a tough guy, but he put it in this way that I thought was really, really beautiful. He said, the people who go and die for our country, they're not the kids who didn't have opportunities. They're the smartest, the best looking, the most patriotic. They're the very best of us. And losing 13 of those kids for nothing, just because of pure stupidity from our leadership, is the most, it's maybe the most ridiculous mistake of the Biden administration. And Kamala Harris ought to own it, but of course she doesn't.
And just how he never mentioned their names, and during the ceremony he's like looking at his watch.
Yeah.
It's actually like hard to believe.
It's really sick. It's really sick. And you realize, like, the guy, Biden, people try to say he's a great guy. I don't know him super well. I do not think Biden is a great guy. I actually think Biden is a bad dude, and we're just seeing him sort of fall into, mental disrepair, but he was never a good dude. He was always what you see, the kind of guy who lets people die and then doesn't mention their name and stares at his watch when you're trying to memorialize these guys. That's just unfortunately who he is.
Well, I think you got to get going to this rally. I think we're going to come with you. But one more question. Who do you think that is going to be the VP on the other side?
I don't know, man.
This is the webinar many of us have been waiting for in a long time. I want to get over this manual to you. We put 300 hours into this on the white paper for AI revolution for many different reasons. And I'll explain that to you. At the end of this webinar, you will get a QR code to get this. And you'll be able to use this within your businesses to sit down with your executives, yourself, your team members, and say, here's what we can be doing with this part. This is what we're worried about. We shouldn't be. This is an opportunity for us. Here's what our competitors are using, X, Y, Z. And by the way, at the end of the webinar, I'm also going to announce 3 new speakers at the Vol Conference. You already know that Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, will be at the Vol Conference. He doesn't do business conferences. This will be the first one he'll be at in a setting like this. And aside from that, before I even get into the webinar, we got 120, 130 slides of the PowerPoint. Some of you guys will get the entire PowerPoint sent to you as well. But let me give you an idea how this thing took place. So for me, I've been in business for quite some time. For the first 7.5 years of being a financial advisor, insurance agent, it was purely hard work. I'm working 80 hours every week trying to make 6 figures. And then all of a sudden, I'm getting to $200,000 a year, $400,000 a year. But it's just pure hard work that we're doing. Later on, start my own insurance company. And we started with 66 agents, and we grew that to 50,000 agents. We sold it a couple years ago for a few $100 million. It was a beautiful exit. And even the buyers that bought us, we grew the EBITDA by 78%. So they're sitting there saying, after we bought it, it is nearly twice as much value it has now than it was 2 years ago. But why did this happen? Several years ago, I'm sitting there trying to identify, I'm going to work 80 hours a week anyways to build a business, but is that all it's going to take for me to have the highest valuation possible? So some of you guys may say, Pat, I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm a business owner, I'm a small, entrepreneur working for somebody. It doesn't matter where you are. This is going to apply to all of you as we're going through. A lot of your objections will be overcome. I'm not a AI guy. I'm not a technology guy. I'm not an engineer. I'm not any of that. I fly out to New York to meet with investment bankers when I was ready to sell my insurance company. And I'm going out there saying, hey, this is how much profit we have every year. What does a company like us sell for in a climate like this? And I'll never forget, we met with 2 investment bankers that were selling businesses 0 to 50 million. Then we met with 2 that sold it from 50 to 200 million. And then we met with 2 that sold the businesses 200 million to a couple $1 billion. The biggest deals done in insurance and fintech, these guys did. So of course I want to do business with those guys. And I talked to one of them looks at me and he says, look, your business right now, the way you have it, what technology do you have behind it? So, well, we have this technology and that technology and this technology. Is it yours? No, but we have the license. What are you paying for the license? $50,000, but it's not yours. No, but it's a license. Nobody cares. It's not yours. What's your point? To be a true fintech, you need to be tech-enabled, and you need to have AI to use within your company, so when somebody decides to acquire your business, they're going to pay real multiples for it. I said, what do you mean? He says, right now, they're going to pay you 5 times multiple for your business. I said, that's it? He said, that's it. I said, what do they pay if you become tech-enabled fintech? He says, well, now you're talking about 15 to 20 times. You know what we did? We raised $10 million. We put the money into our technology called Bamboo. We grew Bamboo from what it was. It took us a year and a half to build this technology. We ended up selling the business for nearly 20 times EBITDA. Why? Because of this. And how much education did I have in AI? This much. How much education do I have as an engineer? Nothing. So I don't want you to sit there and be worried about it. I simply want to hand this over to you. Now, let me give you the second part of the story before we get into this webinar. Last week, I go to New York. I visit Goldman Sachs in New York all day. First meeting starts at 9 o'clock. Last meeting with David Solomon ends around 4:30. David Solomon, some of you guys may know who he is. He is the CEO of Goldman Sachs. Some would call him the 5 most powerful people in the financial industry. You got Jamie Dimon, David Solomon, they're in the top 5 names that you'll regularly hear about. And we had conversations with the people that have families, investments that they manage around $1.2 trillion of money worldwide. Another person we sat with was $250 billion, and we're having all these conversations. I said, so let me ask you a question. How is your vision right now with clients you're dealing with? And we sat down with their TMT team, technology, media, telecommunication, and these guys just took a company public, Duolingo, all these. We're having all of these conversations about Manect, David Consulting, our consulting firm, everything that we're doing. But the main conversation is, how is this being leveraged right now in the marketplace? And David says, just a few years ago, for every 10 employees we had, 1 was an engineer. I said, okay, how about now?
Ooh,
He says,
appreciate the
every 4
follow.
right now, 1 is an engineer. Okay?
Thank you,
And
Leo.
we're hiring machine learning.
Helion.
We're hiring engineers. We're hiring coders.
Appreciate
we're hiring
you.
all of that stuff. We're having all these people that are in the machine learning AI space. Why? Because that's the future, okay? So today's presentation, as we go through all this stuff, don't worry if you're somebody that's big, small, middle, billion. It doesn't matter what you have. No matter what position you are, you're gonna get value on how to be able to position yourself in a better place to win. And keep this part in mind. This is very important for people to know. Most people don't know this. I don't make any money off our holding company. Till today, I've never once taken money off of Valuetainment. We get last couple months, we
Appreciate
get
the
a few hundred
follow.
million
Thank you,
views at this
homie.
point
Also, if
per
you guys
month.
were in Discord,
Our podcast is on
exclamation
fire.
point
David
Discord, just let me know that
Consulting
you
on
followed.
fire.
I can also
Net
give you
on
guys your
fire.
badges and
All
stuff.
of these businesses are doing very well. This is how much money I take off the table. I just did a speaking gig 2 days ago. They paid me
Exclamation point
$250,000. You know how much money
in
went in my
chat.
pocket? This much. It goes all back into the business. Why? Because I think this is the greatest opportunity of wealth creation ever in my lifetime. I've never had this kind of enthusiasm and excitement, and all I'm seeking is for the strategies of others. And for a guy that created content for many years purely around entrepreneurship, I want to share it with you. Very simple. Whatever you do with it, it is what it is, because at the end of the day, I believe all the big problems in the world are going to be solved by entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs working together. I'm going to share with you what I'm doing. With many different opportunities, get involved. Whatever you choose to do with it. If you got on, he's like, all I want is the white paper. Just give it to me and leave me alone. No problem. I want to get involved with bigger things with you guys. No problem. Stick around. We'll talk about that as well. But having said that, let's get right into it. Okay, so a couple things. There's 3 groups on today's webinar when it comes down to AI. Those of you that are doubters, you're ignoring AI. Those of you that are believers, you believe AI is the right way to go, but you're just kind of dabbling in it. And then there's some of you that are on right now saying, I'm a true believer, Pat. Everything I'm doing is AI. No matter where you are, you're going to see what direction this is going with AI. So now, audiences, some of you are actual entrepreneurs, small business owners. Some of you are executives working for a company, trying to take this stuff back to your company to bring value to the company. 3, some of you are parents, literally parents. I just got done with my wife. We had an hour-and-a-half meeting with our estate planning family because we're talking about different kind of trust. And for some of you that have watched the Generational Wealth, you know what some of the things we're working on. Upstairs while we're doing a meeting, it's me, my wife, Tom Ellsworth, and they're here. They drove up from Miami. And he says, everybody right now we're talking about, when we're doing their estate planning and getting a little bit dynastic and all this other stuff, slats and all these things that some of you may be familiar with. All these people that are saying, if you want to get back into working with the family's money or family's businesses, they're no longer saying go get an MBA. They're no longer saying go be a lawyer. They're saying go be an engineer, learn and work for another company as an engineer, then come back to our company. Think about that. I'm a Middle Eastern. Parents used to say, doctor, lawyer, engineer, right? Now it's go be an engineer. Why? Because the future trajectory with AI and NVIDIA now being a $3.2, $3.3 trillion company on any given day is parents, you also need to know how to position your kids so they can succeed in life because things are changing in a big way. Then it's the aspiring entrepreneur. Maybe you're like me when I was at 21 years old saying I want to start a business one day, or you're an independent contractor. Either way, all of this will apply to all of you. Now, couple things with me. There's 2 sides to me. There's the paranoia side to me. You see the guy on the left, which, by the way, great job to AI. They made my skin look flawless, which is great. There's a paranoia side, which only the paranoid survive. What if? What if this? What if that? Whether it's business, family, kids, politics, and everyone have that side. But 51% of me is future looks bright. This is why you'll see a lot of people sporting the future looks bright gear. That's the combination I think you ought to go through with AI today. Why? Here's a couple different things. Today, political instability. Just in the last month, if I told you 6 months ago that you and I, when we get on a webinar on July 31st, I'll be able to tell you someone just went through political, an assassination attempt, a former president. You can say, you're crazy. The existing president stepped down and the vice president is now running for office. You'd say you are out of your mind. No, that's exactly what we are doing today. 98 days left until we decide who the president of U.S. is going to be. It's a lot of moving parts there. 2, financial strain, inflation. Numbers came out today with what's going on with inflation, what's going on with unemployment, what's going on with a lot of different things. Interest rates, scary. Is it going to lower 2 times this year? Are they going to bring it down in the month of September? What's going to happen there? Next, war on horizon. Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Hamas, China, Taiwan, cyber threats, CrowdStrike, AT&T. Technology, will my job be replaced? And by the way, I'll just tell you right up front, when we go through this, your job is most likely going to be replaced for many of you. You'll see why, but there's good news behind it. So now, few things. Nick Saban, many people will call him the greatest coach of all time. Nick Saban, we're in Florida. A lot of people here don't like this guy, but privately they'll say this guy's probably the greatest college football coach of all time. Once said the following: there's the pain of discipline and the pain of regret. If you choose the pain of discipline, you'll never have to deal with the pain of disappointment. For those of you that are on right now, you're part of the 5,000 group that made it. You're on the inside versus the people that are being kicked out. Good for you. Now, whatever you do with this pain that we're going to go through to have to adjust to AI will determine what the future is going to look like for you. So a few things. If you're like me, and you're someone that say, I'll never forget when I would get on any kind of videos like this, webinars like anything like this. I am so hungry to change my life. I don't have any time to have people distract me, for people to throw me off. I'm glued in because I want to find a way to improve myself. If that's you, you're part of that community. Close all your windows except for the webinar. Set your phone aside away from you as much as possible. I know some of you guys are going to have a hard time doing that, but set it as far from you as possible. Engage in the chat if you got questions, because the guys here are following it, and take notes. And having said that, let's get right into it. First video I want to show you what we're already doing with current AI. My team here took a 2-minute video from me, and by the way, now we have channels that's Valuetainment in Russian, me speaking in Russian fluently. I don't speak Russian. Our channel of Spanish, I don't speak Spanish. AI is so advanced nowadays that deep fakes are so easy to make that this guy talking in front of you here soon is not me. This is actually AI doing it. What does this mean? Some of you guys automatically will go and say, oh my God, this is scary. What if they use it against you? But some of you may go to places and saying, so you mean to tell me I can have 10,000 conversations at the same time in my business to sell, to communicate customer service? Yes. Yep. Watch this video clip here of AI. This is me speaking to you. This is AI. Go for it.
Welcome everyone to this groundbreaking webinar on the future of AI. I'm Patrick Bet-David, and today we have something truly special lined up for you. Before we dive in, I want to share a little secret with you. The Patrick you're hearing right now isn't actually me, it's AI. Yes, you heard that right. This voice you're listening to is generated by cutting-edge artificial intelligence. And that's just the beginning. AI can do incredible things like speaking in multiple languages seamlessly. Hola a todos, bienvenidos a nuestro seminario web sobre el futuro de la inteligencia artificial. Soy Patrick Bet-David, o mejor dicho, soy a IPAT. Bonjour à tous, bienvenue à notre webinaire sur l'avenir de l'intelligence artificielle. Je suis Patrick Bet-David, ou plutôt, je suis IPAT. 大家好，欢迎参加我们的关于人工智能未来的网络研讨会。我是 Patrick Bet-David，其实我是 AI Pat。Amazing, right? AI technology allows me to connect with you in your native language, breaking down barriers and making communication more effective than ever. Now, let's hear from the real Patrick Bet-David, who will take us through the exciting world of AI and its endless possibilities.
Let me know if they can hear me or not. Can you guys hear me? Okay, so that's kind of, by the way, just full disclosure. I don't speak Spanish. I don't speak French. I don't speak Mandarin. But guess what? Can you imagine we can now take Valuetainment and create 200 channels based on 200 different languages and allow anybody from the world to listen to our content? What is that worth? How much work is it? How many places can you be at the same time? Customer service to be able to adjust for the language that the person wants to speak to about. Just think about the possibilities. But that's just a small little example of what's going on today. Let's continue. So, the presentation starts now. So the 4 industrial revolutions, and why this is very important, because every single time we went through this, people feared of their jobs being replaced, and it was replaced for many people, and why? But watch this here. So let's go through it. First industrial revolution, 1760s and 1840s. If you want to study the future, you have to study the past and history. This is exactly what we're going to do here. Marked by transition from hand production methods to machines, the rise of the textile industry, development of the steam power and iron production. Second industrial revolution, 1870 to 1914, characterized by the expansion of electricity, petroleum and steel production, internal combustion engine, the telephone, significant advances in manufacturing and production process. The next one, 1960s to 2010s, the digital revolution. You're talking electronics, information technology, automated production, computers, internet, digital. Then we have today the 4th industrial revolution, known as AI, Industry 4.0. The fusion of technologies blurring the lines between the physical, digital, and biological spheres, which is what? AI, robotics, Internet of Things, genetic engineering, quantum computing, predictive healthcare. Wait till we break this down for you to see exactly what this looks like. So now, this automatically offers a lot of opportunity and risk at the same time. We have to look at both of them. You can't just be like, what a great opportunity or what a risk. You got to look at both of them. Only the paranoid survive, as well as future looks bright. So, an industrial revolution is a unique time period for economic opportunity and risk. Each industrial revolution brings transformative changes that create significant economic opportunities and risks. So economic opportunities, innovation and growth, this because of new technologies, industries emerge, job creation. 3, productivity gains, you're able to do things faster in a more efficient way. 4, investment opportunities. And 5, entrepreneurship. Innovators and entrepreneurs can capitalize on new technologies and market needs, leading to the creation of new businesses and startups. Now the risks, job displacement, it's going to happen. Automation and new technologies can render certain jobs and skills obsolete, leading to unemployment and economic displacement for affected workers. It is going to happen. 2, inequality. Economic gains may be unevenly distributed, leading to increased income and wealth inequality. Some people say, but that's unfair. If somebody has access to the same information, This guy takes advantage of it. This person doesn't. This guy 10 years later is worth $78 million. This guy 10 years later is worth $320,000. It's not unfair. This person executed, this person did not. They were afraid. Number 3, market disruption. Established industries and companies may struggle to adapt to new technologies, leading to business failure and market volatility. We're going to talk about that a lot. 4, regulatory challenges. Rapid technological advancement can outpace regulatory frameworks, creating uncertainty and potential risk for businesses and consumers. And last but not least, social impact. The societal changes brought about by industrial revolutions can lead to societal unrest and resistance to change. That is going to happen with AI, except much faster. Let's continue. So now, going back, first industrial revolution, workforce impact. You ready? It is estimated that between 30 to 40% of the workforce transitioned from agriculture to industrial sectors during the first industrial revolution. In 1801, roughly 3 million people were engaged in agriculture in England. By 1851, this number dropped to 1.5 million. 50% were moving to industrial jobs in textiles, iron production, and other sectors. Does this sound familiar to you? Like right now, everybody's saying, do you realize 50% of the jobs are going to be changed? They are, but we've gone through this many, many times. Next, key innovations and their impact. Steam engine, James Watt, 1769. Impact on transportation and manufacturing. In 1830, there were roughly 600 miles of railway in Britain. 20 years later, look at that number, 6,600. That's 11 times more. Steam engines powered factories, enabling mass production. The number of steam engines in use in Britain grew from a dozen in 1770s, just a dozen, few dozen, to 10,000 30 years later by 1800. So industries impacted positively. Look at that. Textile mills, coal mining, iron works, and railways saw significant growth. Look at the negative now. Traditional water-powered and wind-powered industries struggle to compete. Of course, that's the positive, the negative. Next one, spinning jenny. James Hargreaves, 1764. Impact of textile production. One spinning jenny could spin 8 threads at once compared to the single thread spun by traditional spinning wheels. By 1788, there were over 20,000 spinning jennies in use in Britain, significantly reducing the need for manual labor. Positive, cotton mills and factories increased production capacity. Negative, home-based spinning industries faced severe decline as they couldn't match the efficiency. Again, another fear that took place. Next one, power loom. This is Edmund Cartwright, 1785. Power looms automated weaving, increasing output and reducing labor costs. Labor productivity increased by a factor of 20. The work previously done by 2,000 people could now be done by 100. Again, does that sound familiar to you? Oh my God, look at what's going on at McDonald's. They're able to do it with just a machine. We're gonna all lose our jobs. This has happened so many times in the history of America. Initially, many handloom weavers lost their jobs, but eventually new jobs were created in mechanized weaving. Positive, large textile companies flourished. Negative, small-scale handloom weavers saw their business collapse. Next one. So this one we're talking about, what is the word on that one, Rob? I'm sorry, Brandon? Cotton weaver Eli Whitney, right? Look at this, 1793, the cotton gin could clean up to 50 pounds of cotton per day compared to 1 pound per day by hand. That's 50x. Cotton industry production skyrocketed from 1.5 million pounds in 1790 to, look at 20 years later, 85 million pounds. You know what that number is? 60x in 20 years. 60x in 20 years. Positive, cotton plantations and textile factories experienced massive growth. Negative, manual cotton cleaning methods became obsolete. Let's continue. Iron smelting techniques. This is Abraham Darby, 18th century. Innovation. Darby's method of using coke instead of charcoal increased both the quantity and quality of iron produced. Production increased. British iron production increased from 17,350 tons in 1740 to 260,000 tons by 1800. Positive. Iron foundries, machinery production, and construction industries grew rapidly. Negative. Charcoal-based iron production methods declined due to higher costs and lower output. You notice the trend here? Everybody's going through it. Next one. You got the time period here. We're talking about what? Small scale, second industrial revolution. This is 1870 to around 1914. An estimated 40 to 50% of businesses were affected by the shift to mass production and assembly lines. half of them were affected. Millions of workers moved from small-scale artisanal work to factory-based employment in the U.S. Manufacturing employment grew from 2.5 million in 1870, 40 years later, to 8 million, nearly 4x. Let's continue. Next, electricity. Impact on technology and industry. This was a new thing. Guys, imagine if we don't have electricity. All of a sudden you have, oh my God, what are we going to do? What happens to candles? My dad was a candle maker in Iran, just so you know that. That was a skill set if you had. It didn't matter when you had this. Steam provided 80% of mechanical drive capacity manufactured in 1900s, but electricity provided over 50% by 1920 and 78% by 1929. Positive impact, electrical equipment manufacturing, power generation companies, and electric utilities. Negative, traditional steam-powered and manual manufacturing methods saw a reduction in usage. Same thing you're going to see again. Telephone, Graham Bell, 1876. Adoption by 1900. Look at this number. You're going to be shocked by this chart I'm about to show you. Over 1.3 million telephones in the United States. It grew to 6 million 10 years later. Revolutionized business operations by enabling instant communication over long distances. Industries impacted, positive, telecommunication industry, customer service sectors, and global trade. Negative, telegraph services faced significant reductions as telephones became more widespread. When's the last time you sent a telegraph, by the way? You haven't even thought about it, right? That was a crisis in the early 1900s. Next, internal consumption engine that was designed. So check this out, automobiles. The number of cars in the U.S. grew from a few hundred in 1890s to 1.5 million. Listen, from a few hundred in the 1890s to 1.5 million. Just 26 years later, between 1908 and when the Ford Motor Company introduced the Model T in the 1927, when its production ended, the number of registered automobiles in the U.S. grew from 197,000 to, ready, to 23 million. That's like Elon Musk the other day said, the robot industry is going to be XYZ, and we're going to be 10% of it. Everybody's like, robot? So most of you guys are going to own a robot. I'm not going to own a robot. He said, no, you're going to own a robot, and Tesla's going to sell it to you, and we're going to have 10 to 20% of market share. This guy's crazy. We're not buying no robots. You mean someone's going to cook me food? Yes, a robot's going to be cooking you food. Can you make horme sabzi? What's horme sabzi? Oh, it's a Persian stew. I'll make you horme sabzi. Can you make me a Peruvian dish? Can you make me this? Can you imagine a robot's going to be your chef and you're going to buy it for $10,000 to $30,000 to cook for you? Industries impacted, positive. Automotive industry, oil and gas industry, and machinery manufacturing, negative. Horse-drawn carriage manufacturers and related businesses experienced a downturn. This is when we used to go places on horses. When's the last time you went to school on a horse or went to work on a horse? If I went to work today in the 1890s, there'd be 75 horses parked outside. We don't have 75 horses parked outside because this industry disrupted the horse industry. Maybe that was a good thing. Next one, assembly line, Henry Ford, efficiency drastically reduced the cost and time of manufacturing. The time to assemble a Model T car dropped from 12 hours to an hour and a half. By 1914, Ford factories were producing 250,000 cars annually. Positive, mass production industry, especially automotive and consumer goods manufacturing. Negative, small scale and artisanal manufacturing struggle to compete with the efficiency and cost effectiveness of mass production. Next, watch this one here. Time period of third industrial revolution, shift in employment. Manufacturing declined. Manufacturing jobs in the U.S. declined from about 30% of the workforce in 1950 to less than 10% in 2010. Look at that chart. This represents a reduction over 7 million manufacturing jobs. The number of U.S. manufacturing employees peaked at 19.5 in 1979 and is at roughly 13 million today. 7 million, poof. What happened to those people? Are they homeless in streets or did they adjust to a different job? You'll see what happens here in a minute to those guys. Watch this one here. 1950 to 2010's shift in employment. Growth in IT and related industries. Employment in IT, telecommunication, electronics grew substantially. For example, IT occupations rose from 450,000 in 1970 to 4.6 million in 2014. Imagine what the numbers are today. Here's the next one for you. 1950s to 2010. Key inventions and their impact. Transistor, right? This is William Shockey, Walter Bratton, and John Bardeen. Impact on electronics and computers. The transistor replaced vacuum tubes, leading to the development of smaller, more efficient, and more reliable electronic devices. The semiconductor industry grew rapidly, with global sales reaching $300 billion in 2010. Look at the chart to the right. Look what it looked like in '87. Look where it's at now. What would you have liked to have been part of that industry? That was a big boom. Positive, semiconductor manufacturing, consumer electronics, and computer industries. Negative, vacuum tube manufacturers saw their business become obsolete. Not they lost 20%, not they lost 50%. They disappeared because they did not adapt. Next, personal computers, 1970s and 80s, impact on accessibility in businesses. Adoption. By the mid-1980s, millions of personal computers were in homes and offices worldwide. It says millions. In the 80s, if you had a computer, you were considered rich. By 2010, there were over 1 billion PCs in use globally. Productivity PCs transform business operations, enhancing productivity and enabling new business models. Industries impacted, software development, IT services, and others. Negative, typewriter manufacturing relating industries faced significant declines. Again, same exact thing. Next one, internet. This is, we're looking at from 69 to 89. Impact on communication, commerce, and information sharing. Adoption. Internet usage grew from a few thousand users in the early 80s to 2 billion in 2010. And look at the chart on the right. That goes till 2020. Look what that shows you. 1990, what do you see? What do you see in 95? Nothing. What do you see in 2024? Nearly 5 billion people are using the internet in 2024. E-commerce sales reached $1 trillion in 2010. It's a lot higher than that today. Positive, online retail, digital marketing, and cloud computing. Negative, traditional brick and mortar stores.
Best
and
viewers
media
on.
struggle to compete. This is when you see a lot of malls being shut down. When I used to live in Dallas, Preston Hollow, right across the street from us, there was a massive mall shut down right here in Florida off of not commercial. What's the other one? I don't know which one the other one is. Down the street, Sunrise, I think it is. Massive mall shut down. They can't sell that property to anybody. It's a different business model today. Mobile phones, 1980s to 1990s. Impact on communication, information access. Adoption, the number of mobile phone users grew from a few million in 1980s to 5 billion in 2010. And if you look at the chart on the right, you know what it tells you? There are more mobile phones worldwide than people. We have 8.59 billion mobile phones and only 7.95 billion. To those of you that are part of the two-phone community, you know who you are, right? This is what happens when you're part of that community. But by the way, just go back. Look at the chart right there. Look at 95. How many phones do you see in 95? Nothing. Look at the spike suddenly to the amount of phones, right? Imagine if you were a part of that industry early on. Economic impact, the mobile phone industry became a $1 trillion market by 2010, driving innovation and connectivity. Positive, telecommunication, mobile app development, and portable electronics. By the way, on the mobile app development, do you know Tom's first big exit? Tom Ellsworth, BizDoc, him and I do podcasts, and he does a lot of shows for Tim and been my business partner for almost 20 years. You know what was his first big exit? Jamdat Mobile. You know what Jamdat was? They made games for phones. You know what they sold it for? $680 million. Do you know to who? EA Sports. You know what year? 2004. Look at the timing of what happened. That was Tom's first big exit he got, that he became a multi-millionaire. Negative. Landline phone services and public pay phones experienced significant reductions. Let's continue. So now AI. The fourth industry, which they're talking about from 2010 till today and on. Adoption. AI adoption has been growing rapidly, with global spending on AI system reaching $98 billion, up from $37 billion just 4 years ago. Employment AI is expected to create 97 million new jobs by 2025. However, how many will it be displacing according to World Economic Forum? Look at that. 85 million. But notice, 85 million will be displaced, but 97 million new jobs. What does it mean? There's 12 million new jobs that they need, that they don't have the people to displace. Where are those people going to come from? That's the point. Every time a disruption like this happens, there are new jobs. You and I naturally learn new skill sets. 97% of business owners believe ChatGPT will help their business industries impact. Positive. Tech companies, healthcare, finance, customer service industries have seen significant improvements in efficiency and innovation. Negative. Jobs involving routine and repetitive tasks, such as data entry and some aspects of manufacturing, are being automated, leading to job losses in those areas. Next. So, part of ChatGPT's capabilities, okay, that we look at. Number one, command line simplification. Breaks down complex computer commands in easy to understand terms. explaining each parameter and function. 2, custom command generation. 3, data cleaning and formatting. 4, information retrieval. 5, terminology assistant. You can go through this yourself when we give you the white paper. Language translation, we already know that, and they're very accurate. Debugging help. Continuing math calculations. The other day, they brought out comparing financial advisors with MBAs that are, folks who went to school to be CFOs, okay, compared to ChatGPT, who was making better estimation on what the market was going to do. ChatGPT was able to beat them 70% of the time versus 60%. ChatGPT 4, that's what the model was. This is what, in an article we were reading about, that was saying. Number 9, technical task assistance. 10, content creation. In a major, there are so many podcasters worldwide right now that do their interviews, and 90% of the questions they ask is all ChatGPT. They'll say, hey, what's 5 unique questions to ask this person I'm interviewing? What are some 4 angles you would take that no one's ever taken when it comes down to the Kamala Harris bite? What are the 3 angles I should take when it comes down to true crime? Their entire podcast is all based on AI. All of it. Most people don't know about it. They don't have a big personality, but they got millions of subscribers because they're leveraging AI. 11, social media management. It's pretty much all done at right now. 12, research guidance, educational support, collaboration enhancement. I don't know if you've ever been 12 years old in 2024. I have not. I have a 12-year-old son. You know what they're being taught? All of these different things today. These are normal things to a 12-year-old today. To you and I, oh my God, look what we're going through. To them, it's like, yeah, what are you talking about? This is what we're learning today. Exactly. Watch this. Time it took to any of the platforms to get to 1 million users the fastest. Netflix, it took nearly 1,250 days, okay? Kickstarter, 900 days. Airbnb, 900 days. Twitter, these are days, Brandon, right, that I'm going through. Twitter, 750 days. Foursquare, 400 days. Facebook, 300 days. Dropbox, 250. Spotify, 200. Instagram, roughly 80 days. Look at ChatGPT. They flinched. They got 1 million users. Literally. They flinched, and they got 1 million users just based on everybody using it. So now let's continue. This next one is here. Absolutely wild for some of you guys that are, the ones following this quantum computing. This is what it looks like. Google's Sycamore quantum computer was able to complete a calculation in seconds that would have taken the world's fastest supercomputer over 47 years. Did you guys hear that? This quantum computer was able to complete a calculation that a supercomputer would have taken 47 years to do. It did it in seconds. In 2019, Google also claimed that its quantum computer could solve a problem in 200 seconds that would have taken the world's fastest supercomputer 10,000 years. 10,000 years. Internet of Things, IoT, adoption. By 2021, there were over 12 billion IoT devices worldwide, with projections reaching 25 billion by 2030. Market size, global IoT market size was roughly valued at $308 billion in 2020 and expected to reach $1.1 trillion in how many years? Just 8 years. 4x in another 8 years. Now, advanced robotics. Impact on automation and labor. Adoption. The global market for industrial robots was valued at $45 billion in 2020, projected to be $74 billion. Employment. Robotics is expected to augment human labor, particularly in manufacturing, logistics, and healthcare, but also displace some manual jobs. Industries impacted. Positive. Manufacturing, warehousing, healthcare industries have seen increased efficiency and productivity. Negative. Jobs involving manual labor and simple repetitive tasks are being automated, reducing demand for human labor in these roles. Watch this clip here. If you've never seen this, look how wild this is. Brandon, go ahead and play this clip. This is Boston Dynamics. Look at the kind of stuff they're building. Look at it. He needs help. Calls his buddy. Guy shows up. Look at this. Okay. Opens it. You know the small little things that we know how to do? Watch this. Lets his friend in. And look at the neck turning. We can't do that, but this thing can do that. Okay. This is the future, by the way. If it makes you feel uncomfortable, it's already here. This is not like a new thing that just happened last week. This has been around for many, many years, and soon it's going into a lot of different shops that people will be using. Let's continue. 3D printing. So these guys are now printing objects with high accuracy and precision to match their design. The global 3D printing market size was valued at $13.7 billion in 2020 and expected to be at $63.5 billion next year. Aerospace, automotive, healthcare, and consumer good industries have adopted 3D printing for rapid prototyping and production. Positive, custom manufacturing, prototyping, and medical device production. Negative, traditional manufacturing processes that are less flexible and more expensive have seen a decrease in demand. Blockchain. You guys saw what happened this week with President being out to Bitcoin saying Bitcoin's the future, cryptocurrency is the future. All this Gary Gensler, all these things that you keep hearing about with blockchain. Watch blockchain. Adoption. The blockchain market size was valued at $3 billion in 2020, projected to be at $40 billion next year. That's 13x in 5 years. Okay, cryptocurrency by 2021 was over 100 million Bitcoin wallets, indicating widespread adoption of blockchain technology. Positive, financial services, supply chain management, and digital identity verification. Negative, traditional banking and financial transaction methods are being disrupted by decentralized finance. And a lot of these big guys, the blacks, Black Rocks and Chases that would never have bought into this stuff. Now they're kind of like, well, we need to put a little bit of our portfolio into Bitcoin. They're starting to talk like that. What happened all of a sudden? You can't wait for advanced innovation today. It's coming whether you like it or not. It's going to be here. Now watch this. History of AI. The concept of AI dates back thousands of years, originating with ancient philosophers pondering life and death. Early investors created automatons, mechanical devices that moved independently. The term automaton comes from ancient Greek, meaning acting of one's own will. One of the earliest recorded automatons was a mechanical pigeon created around 400 BC by a friend of the philosopher Plato. Leonardo da Vinci designed a famous automaton around 1495. While the idea of self-functioning machines is ancient, significant progress towards modern AI began in the 20th century. So now, notable dates when you're thinking about AI. Number one, first expert system came into commercial market, known as the XCON, terrible name. It was designed to assist in the order of computer systems by automatically picking components based on computer needs. 1981, Japanese government allocated $850 million, would be $2 billion of today's money, to the fifth generation computer project. Their aim was to create computers that would translate, converse in human language, and express reasoning on a human level. Jim Simons, this is a wonderful story of what this man did. He just recently died January of this year. The founder of Renaissance Technologies began integrating AI and advanced mathematical models into his hedge fund operations in the 80s. Renaissance Technologies, established in 1982, is renowned for being a pioneer in the use of AI in quantitative analysis. The most successful fund of all time was created with his strategy. Later on, you'll see some of the numbers that this guy put up using AI that nobody, including Ray Dalio, Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett, none of these guys could do what they did because they simply use AI. The AAI warns of incoming AI winter where funding and interest would decrease and make research significantly more difficult. This is 84. They continue the same thing with Aaron. Then in 86, Ernst Dickmann and his team, Bundeswehr University of Munich, created and demonstrated the first driverless car or robot car. It would drive up to 55 miles an hour on roads, that was a lot in Germany, that didn't have other obstacles or human drivers. 87, commercial launch of Alacrity was the first strategy managerial advisory system and used a complex expert system with 3,000 rules. This continues. 87, the market for specialized Lisp-based hardware collapsed due to cheaper and more accessible competitors that use run Lisp software, including those offered by IBM and Apple. This caused many specialized Lisp companies to fail, as the technology was now easily accessible. A computer programmer in 88 named Rollo Carpenter invented the chatbot Jabberwocky, great name, which he programmed to provide interesting and entertaining conversations to humans. By the way, that was like the original Chat GPT, right? Deep Blue, 1997, developed by IBM, beat the world chess champion Gary Kasparov, somebody we've had at the Vault Conference before, in a highly publicized match, becoming the first program to beat a human chess champion. 97, Windows released a speed recognition software. 2000, Professor Cynthia Brizo developed the first robot that could simulate human emotions with its face, which included eyes, eyebrows, ears, and a mouth. It was called Kismet. The first Roomba was released in 2002. 2003, NASA landed 2 rovers on Mars, and they navigated the surface of the planet without human intervention. 2006, companies such as Twitter, Facebook, Netflix started using AI as part of their advertising and user experience algorithm. 2010, Microsoft launches Xbox 360 Connect, which used AI. 2011, NLP computer program to answer questions named Watson. You remember Watson? It won Jeopardy against 2 former champions in a televised game. 2011, Apple released Siri, the first popular virtual assistant. 2012, 2 researchers from Google trained a neural network to recognize cats by showing its unlabeled images and no background information. 2015, Elon Musk, Stephen Hawking, and Steve Wozniak and other 3,000 engineers and entrepreneurs signed an open letter to the world's government systems banning the development of autonomous weapons for purpose of war. You're going to see how a quote is going to overcome that objection for some of you guys that are worried about AI. Hanson Robotics created a humanoid robot named Sophia, who became known as the first robot citizen and was the first robot created with a realistic human appearance and the ability to see and replicate emotions and communicate. 17, Facebook programmed 2 AI chatbots to converse and learn how to negotiate, but as they went back and forth, they ended up forging English and developed their own language completely autonomously. 2018, Chinese tech group Alibaba had a language processing AI that beat human intellect on a Stanford reading and comprehensive test. Wait for this one here. Google's AlphaStar reached Grandmaster on the video game StarCraft 2, outperforming all but 2.2% of human players. 2020, OpenAI started beta testing GPT-3, a model that used deep learning, which now many of us use the GPT-4. 2021, OpenAI developed the DALL-E, which can process and understand images enough to produce accurate captions, moving AI one step closer to understanding the visual world. 2022, OpenAI launches GPT-4. And just 5 days after the launch, the application already acquires 1 million users. And in 2023, OpenAI introduces GPT-4 multi-model LLM for text and image prompt. Elon Musk, Wozniak, and others call for a 6-month pause in training for more advanced AI system. By the way, all the designs you see here was designed by AI. This isn't our graphic designers doing this. This was AI. So let me continue here. All this stuff that we're talking about, you just got a lot of information. Now, again, all of this stuff that you guys are watching, you're going to get this at the end when you get a QR code to go download this. And you'll have that part, as well as we'll announce the 3 new speakers for the Vault. But stick around for this. Some of you guys will get this entire PowerPoint being sent to you as well. But let's continue with this. So now, how AI is impacting the economy. Reskilling needs, according to the McKinsey Global Institute. Up to 375 million workers, 14% of the global workforce, may need to switch occupational categories by 2030 due to automation and AI. And odds are, if that's 375 million workers worldwide, if we take 14% of all of you on this right now, which is 5,000, 30,000 people are trying to get on right now, but 5,000 of you that made it, good for you. 14% of those that are on, 700 of you, whatever you're doing right now, your job's going to be replaced in the next 6 years. Just so you know that. That's according to McKinsey, okay? According to an Accenture report, manufacturing sector will see the greatest financial benefit from AI adoption, with a gain of $3.8 trillion expected by 2035. Let's continue. AI is expected to contribute up to $15.7 trillion to global economy by 2030, according to PwC. This represents a 14% increase in global GDP. Again, more wealth for others who are able to capitalize. McKinsey estimates that AI could deliver additional global economic activity of around $13 trillion by 2030, boosting the global GDP by 1.2% annually. You know how you should process that, by the way? You should ask yourself, what percentage of that $18.7 trillion is going to be my family's? It's a question you got to ask yourself. How much of that's going to be yours? Yeah, by the way, 15.7 trillion plus 13 trillion, $28.7 trillion. You ought to be able to get a piece of it for you, whether you're going to do it as the business owner or you're working for a company that's going to bring these things so you become so valuable to the company that you participate in the upside. You ought to have a decision of how you can contribute to whatever you're doing right now in your family. AI will have an estimated 21% net increase on U.S. GDP by 2030. Net increase, according to Forbes. Now, AI business optimization. Let's take a look at this here. JP Morgan Chase's Coin platform reduced the time spent on reviewing, guys, this is a big number here, reviewing legal documents that saved the company 360,000 hours of lawyers' time annually. By the way, they pay $800 an hour for corporate lawyers. You know what's $800 an hour times 360,000? Do the calculation right now on your phone. I think it's roughly $288 million. Is it $288 million? Somewhere around $288 million if I'm not mistaken, okay? That's the number they saved because of AI. I mean, that's pretty crazy to be thinking about, right? Retail, customer interaction, AI-driven personalized shopping experiences are predicted to influence up to 45% of all online purchases by 2025, according to Gartner. Let's continue. Healthcare. The AI healthcare market is projected to reach $45.2 billion by 2026, grown at a compound annual rate, CAGR, of 44.9% from 2019 to 2026, according to Allied Market Research. Cost savings. AI could save the U.S. healthcare economy $150 billion annually by 2026. That means AI could decrease the cost of insurance. Think about that for a second. Pharmaceuticals, AI can reduce the R&D, research and development costs of new drugs by up to how much? 70%. You think this affects your parents and your grandparents? And shorten drug discovery times of up to 50%, according to Deloitte. So AI is also going to make you live longer and be healthier for those that choose to live longer. Now, trends in business. Let's continue. According to a Forbes advisor survey, 64% of businesses expect AI to increase productivity. 97% of business owners believe ChatGPT will help their business. AI in retail is expected to generate additional $2.95 trillion by 2030. That's PwC. 1 in 3 business plans to use GPT to create website content, while 44% aim to generate content in multiple languages. You just saw me speak in 3 different languages right now, including English, right? Spanish, French, and Mandarin. That was all AI, right? This is the direction we're going. Now watch this. Most ways people are using AI. Customer service is number 1 at the top. Cybersecurity and fraud prevention, number 2. Digital assistance. Now think whatever one of these applies to you. This is you, your opportunity. Customer relationship management, inventory management, content creation, product recommendation, accounting, supply chain operations, recruiting. So many opportunities within this. Now watch this. For the longest time, parents were like, look, kid, if you want to go to college and you want to major in STEM, proficiency in STEM, that's what I want you to do. In 2016, most critical skills required of the workforce, what was number 1? Proficiency in STEM, 42%. Where's it at now? All the way at the bottom, 28%. What went up? Time management skills and ability to prioritize went from 33% to 42%. Wait a minute. Time management skills and ability to prioritize by human beings. What does that mean? You're going to be needed. It's just people that are able to become more efficient. So how does somebody become more efficient? By learning how to use what? AI. You can look through this list here, but you see how things are adjusting. Hey, I want to grow up to be a doctor. You'll see in a minute here. Not a lot of parents are going to say, kid, go be a doctor when you grow up. You'll see why. Case studies. This is Jim Simons, the gentleman we talked about earlier with Renaissance Technologies. It's absolutely insane what this man did. So he used to work for the NSA in 1965. He worked there for 3 years. 3 years later, he makes comments about Vietnam. He gets fired. He leaves, goes and becomes a professor. 82, he starts Renaissance Technologies, hires a guy from MIT. I'm going to give you the story, and I'm going to skip some of this stuff here. In 1988, they start their fund. Their fund first year loses 4%. Second year does 55%. Their fund from 1988 to today, you know what their return has been? 69%. You know what their fees are roughly? Up to 44%. Even after they take 44% of fees, their clients have received an annual rate of return of nearly 39% from 88 till today. These guys did so well that by 1995-ish, they closed the fund. They said, we don't want any more new money. You know what they did by 2005? They sent all the investors' money back to them, and they said, listen, you got to take your money out. Moving forward, the only people that can have their money in Medallion Fund are current or previous employees. That's how this fund did. If in 1988 you put $1 in S&P 500, $1 with Berkshire Hathaway, or $1 in the Medallion Fund, here's what you would have today. S&P 500 from 1988 today would be $42. Berkshire Hathaway would be $154. Medallion Fund today would be $44,000. These guys dominated because they used to say, you can't be trading stocks faster than a week and a half. You're going to lose money. They said, no, man, we're going to use AI and we're going to trade every day and a half. And everybody said, these guys are delusional. They don't know what they're talking about. They didn't beat everybody. They beat everybody by 7 touchdowns. They destroyed them, okay? They destroyed them is what he did. And this guy ended up being worth, I don't know, nearly $20 billion when he wrote one of the best books, by the way, that everybody should read. Passed away 6 months ago. God bless him. Okay, let me go back to this. Okay, next. Elon Musk and Tesla. Look what these guys did. Just look at the chart on the right. Okay, in U.S. EV sales, no brand comes close to Tesla. Just look at that, 2023. They sold 325,000 cars in 2023. The next 19 combined can't compete with Tesla. Chevrolet's 2, then it's Ford, then it's Hyundai. Can't compete. Why? AI. Next, Jeff Bezos and Amazon. Look what these guys did using AI. You know what the chart shows on the right? The average click-to-door speed. That's what that is. You click, you purchase, how many days it takes to come to you. Amazon used to be 4.6 days at the beginning of 2020. They brought it down to 1.5 days. Right now, when you place an order with Amazon, how long does it take to come to your house? Look at their competitors. They're 5.2 days. Who are you going to order with? You're going to go 1.5 days or 5.2 days with Walmart or Target or any of the other guys. By the way, this is exactly what McDonald's did when they destroyed everybody. Fast food. Boom, 59 seconds, you're out. Boom, order stuff is in. Are you kidding me? Exactly. What's the valuation of Tesla? Roughly $600, $700 billion on any given day, maybe $800 billion. What's the valuation of Amazon? $1 trillion. Do you think this guy knew he was going to build $1 trillion business when he was first trying to replace bookstores? No. As things changed, they added AI and technology, and then all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute. AWS, hosting, we can sell everything. Boom. Bezos is worth $200 billion. Musk is worth $240 billion because of the usage of AI. Let's continue. Sundar Pichai and Google, again, look at this here when it comes down to search engines. 90.7% of all searches being done is Google. And I know there's a lot of stuff to be able to say with Google, what they've done this last week. They own 91% of it. This is pretty much a monopoly that they have as well. Guess what they use? AI. This is another one for you with Microsoft. Look at these guys. His background, the CEO of Microsoft, has driven, the CEO Satya Nadella has driven the company's AI strategy to enhance its products and services. Use of AI, Microsoft integrates AI into its cloud computing service, Office Suite, and customer service solutions. Azure, Microsoft's cloud computing, platform offers AI services such as machine learning, cognitive services, and bot frameworks. And look what they've done on the right. He said AI is the defining technology of our times, and we're infusing it into what? Everything we offer at Microsoft to empower people and organizations. Look at the businesses on the right. Azure, $80 billion. Microsoft 365, $49 billion. LinkedIn, $15 billion. Windows 11, $22 billion. Xbox, $15 billion. Copilot, $12 billion. What's their total revenue? $211 billion of revenues? Exactly. Why? Because he said what? He said, we're infusing AI into everything we offer at Microsoft to empower people and organizations. Reed Hastings and Netflix. Look at these guys. That's what happened with cable. That's what happened with Netflix. What did they do? AI. Blockbuster versus Netflix. Blockbuster didn't want to touch AI. Netflix did. What happened? The red is Netflix. The blue is Blockbuster. When's the last time you went to Blockbuster? We have a lot of good stories. I used to go to Blockbuster every Friday and Saturday night and stand in line hoping that movie gets dropped off by somebody, and we snatch it. We would say, before you drop it, can you just give it to me? No, man, I got to drop it off. Can I go in there with you? Hey, man, he wants to give it to me. Do you remember those days? You have to be 40 years old to remember those days. It's called Blockbuster days. No more Blockbuster days. Right now, it's called Netflix and chill, right? And Netflix and chill is what it is today. Some of you guys probably prefer that. So Kodak. Kodak was a leading photographer. These are the guys that screwed up, by the way, and didn't adapt. Everybody used to use Kodak. You know what happened to Kodak? They're gone. They used to have $1.1 billion in revenue. You know where they're at right now? $120 million. They were afraid to touch AI. Kodak was slow to embrace digital photography and AI-driven image processing, while the company invented the first digital camera. You're the company that invents it, and they ask him, why don't you release it to the public? Because we were worried it was going to put us out of business. Think about that right there. You come up with the first digital camera and you don't sell it to the market. Kodak right now should be a $200 billion company, minimum, selling all these cameras to the phone companies. How big would these guys be? But no, they were afraid. They didn't capitalize off of AI. When's the last time you bought a Kodak product, by the way? When's the last time you saw a Kodak commercial? When's the last time? You have to buy a 1960s magazine to see a commercial of them. They disappeared. Nokia, same thing. I used to have a Nokia phone. What happened with them? They were afraid. They didn't see all the stuff that was going on with AI-driven smartphones, but one guy did. What was his name? Steve Jobs. What happened to Apple? It's a $3 trillion company, give or take, because they understood AI. Sears. Remember Sears? Go back and look at when Sears got started. It's like 1886 or some weird number like that. What happened to Sears? They didn't want to touch AI. Who did? This guy named Jeff Bezos. What happened to Amazon? What happened to Sears? Wiped out. Look at their revenue, by the way. They used to do $53 billion of sales. When? In 2006. What's their number right now? Look at their number right now. 3.26 billion in 2020. It's lower today, right, with the number. So choosing the right AI tools matter when it comes down to this. So cloud pricing optimization. Examples, Airbnb uses AI on AWS for capacity management, custom cost, and usage, data tools, and optimizing storage and computing capacity. Dropbox saved nearly $75 million by using AI to optimize cloud costs and reduce AWS dependency. AI tools identify cloud usage patterns, detect anomalies, and uncover cost-effective resources. Now, some of you guys, again, you could bring this to your company, or you can do it within your company. Voice assistant, chatbots. Over 60% of business owners believe AI will improve customer relations. Example, Pentagon Credit Union chatbots for faster customer query resolutions now handles 25% of common internal service requests, freeing up service desk staff to focus on more complex tasks. How awesome is that? Amazing. Uptime and reliability optimization. AI helps maintain uptime and website reliability by scanning for inefficiencies and potential disruptions. The examples can be with a lot of different companies: Netflix, Uber, Facebook, Salesforce. At the bottom, AI ops tools help intelligent alerting, root cause analysis, anomaly detection, and capacity optimization. Delta Airlines digital simulation, environmental for global operations. It can continue with other things. Productivity maintenance. AI is used to analyze data and identify maintenance needs to ensure safety and efficiency. Again, I can give you many of these examples. You can go through this when you look at what's going on with AI. These tools are available to you when we give you the white paper and the PowerPoint. Some of you guys will have access to go through this yourself. Here's Dwayne Johnson, who will be at the Fall Conference. I believe this is one of the first business conferences he'll ever be attending. And we'll be doing a 90-minute interview together. Some of you guys who attend will be, may even have a chance to ask him a question. He once said, success isn't always about greatness. It's about consistency. Consistent hard work leads to success. Greatness will come. Dwayne Johnson. That means that applies to you and I as well. Objections in AI implementation. Let's look at this. Cost concerns. Well, how much is this going to cost me? Many business owners worry about the high initial investment required for AI implementation, including software, hardware, and skilled personnel. Lack of understanding. How does this work? I don't know how this works. Data privacy and security. Integration challenges. Job displacement. These are some of the things we talked about. Look what Will Guidara said, a good friend of mine who wrote the book Unreasonable Hospitality, New York Times bestseller, starts a restaurant, is a regular restaurant in New York, makes it a 1-star, 1 Michelin star, 2 Michelin star, 3 Michelin star, top 50 restaurant, top 10 restaurant, not in New York, in the world, and eventually becomes a number one restaurant in the world, and he sells it. He says, you're not always going to agree with everything you hear, just like today in AI, but you've got